Leo's consciousness slammed back into existence with the force of a hammer striking an anvil. One moment, there was nothing, the fading memory of a hospital bed, the beep of monitors, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and the next, he was standing in a dimly lit room that smelled of coal smoke, hot metal, and something else, something alien. A faint, electric hum vibrated through the air, like the background noise of a massive machine. He blinked, his vision swimming. The room was small, perhaps 10 feet square, with stone walls that were rough-hewn and stained with soot. A single, barred window high on one wall let in a sliver of pale, grayish light that did little to dispel the gloom. In the center of the room stood a forge, its coals glowing a dull red, and beside it, an anvil perched on a thick wooden stump. Tools hung on the walls, hammers of various sizes, tongs, files, and chisels, all looking well used but serviceable. A workbench cluttered with scraps of metal and leather completed the scene. Where? Leo's voice came out as a croak. He was wearing simple, coarse clothing, a tunic and trousers of undyed wool, stained with sweat and grime. His hands, when he looked down at them, were calloused and strong, the hands of a laborer, not the frail, trembling ones he remembered from his hospital bed. He was young again, maybe in his early 20s, with a wiry build that felt unfamiliar yet strangely capable. Before he could process this further, a translucent blue screen materialized in front of his eyes, hovering in the air like a hologram. Words scrolled across it in a crisp, sans serif font. System notification. Welcome to the world of Ethelgard. You have been assigned class, Blacksmith, Apprentice. Mandatory quest, forge 1 iron dagger within 24 hours. Reward, 10 system credits. Penalty for failure, energy harvesting, moderate. Leo staggered back, his heart pounding. What the hell is this? He muttered, reaching out to touch the screen. His fingers passed through it, leaving ripples of light. The words remained, cold and unyielding. He remembered the outline he'd read, or had he dreamed it? A world ruled by a system, farming human suffering. Was this real? The details were too vivid, the chill of the stone floor under his bare feet, the ache in his muscles from what must have been a long day's work, the metallic taste in the air. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. Panic wouldn't help. He had to survive. The notification mentioned a penalty, energy harvesting. That sounded ominous, like something out of a dystopian nightmare. He glanced around the room again. This was a blacksmith's shop, or at least an apprentice's cell. The tools were here, and on the workbench, he spotted a small pile of iron ingots, rough and unrefined. The quest was straightforward, forge a dagger. Leo had never been a blacksmith in his previous life, he'd been a software engineer, debugging code until his body gave out. But as he approached the forge, a strange sense of familiarity washed over him. His hands knew what to do. He picked up a pair of tongs, his grip firm and sure, and selected an ingot from the pile. It was cool and heavy in his palm, about the size of his fist. He placed it in the forge, using the bellows to stoke the coals until they blazed with a fierce, orange heat. The iron began to glow, first a dull red, then cherry, then a bright yellow-white. As he worked, memories trickled in, not his own, but this body's. Fragments of training, how to judge temperature by color, how to strike with the hammer to shape the metal without cracking it, how to quench and temper. It was as if the system had implanted basic skills along with the class assignment. Leo gritted his teeth, accepting it for now. He needed to complete this quest, to buy time to understand this world. He pulled the glowing iron from the forge with the tongs, the heat washing over his face in a wave. Laying it on the anvil, he picked up a medium-sized hammer. The first strike rang out, a clear, sharp clang that echoed in the small room. Sparks flew, tiny stars of molten metal. He fell into a rhythm, hammering the iron into a rough blade shape, turning it with the tongs, reheating it when it cooled. Sweat dripped from his brow, mingling with the soot on his skin. The physical exertion was intense, but it felt good, cathartic even. For a while, he lost himself in the work, the repetitive motions pushing aside the fear and confusion. But as he began to refine the dagger's edge, something odd happened. A tingling sensation spread from his hands up his arms, like static electricity. At first, he thought it was just fatigue, but then he noticed the metal itself seemed to shimmer, as if viewed through a heat haze. The blade, which should have been a simple, unadorned piece of iron, started to show faint, silvery veins, like cracks of light beneath the surface. Leo paused, frowning. This wasn't in the memories. He held the blade closer, squinting in the dim light. A new screen flickered into existence, overlapping the quest notification. This one was different, its edges were jagged, glitching like corrupted data, and the text was a sickly green instead of blue. Hidden skill unlocked, Shatter Equilibrium. Effect, allows forging of items that introduce paradoxes into system code. Current application, minor glitch detection. Item analysis, Iron Dagger, in progress. Base stats, damage +2, durability 10-10. Hidden stats, system credit drain, passive, drains 0.1 credits per minute from wielder's account. Unauthorized modification detected. Leo's breath caught. Shatter Equilibrium. The words from the outline echoed in his mind. A cheat skill. He stared at the dagger, now cooling on the anvil. The silvery veins pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He had done this somehow, just by forging it. Was it his own nature, his background in coding, leaking into this world? Or had the system made a mistake, assigning him a class that could break its own rules? He finished the dagger quickly, quenching it in a barrel of water with a hiss of steam. The blade emerged dark and sharp, but those veins were still visible if you looked closely, a subtle network of light. He wrapped the hilt in leather from the workbench, his hands trembling slightly now, not from fear, but from a dawning excitement. This was power. Real power. Not the brute strength of a warrior, but something subtler, more dangerous. He could break the system from within. As he held the completed dagger, another screen appeared, this one flashing red with urgency. System alert, unauthorized modification detected. Location, Blacksmith Apprentice Cell 7, District 3, Capital City Ethel. Item, Iron Dagger, glitched. Action required, containment and investigation. Dispatching system enforcers. Leo's blood ran cold. He dropped the dagger on the workbench with a clatter. Outside, he heard the sound of heavy boots on cobblestones, growing louder, accompanied by the clank of armor. Shouts echoed through the narrow streets beyond his window. Secure the area. No one leaves. He had minutes, maybe less. Think, Leo, think. He couldn't fight, he was just an apprentice blacksmith with a glitched dagger. But he could hide the evidence. He snatched up the dagger, looking for a place to conceal it. Under the workbench? No, too obvious. In the forge? The coals might destroy it, but that would take time. His eyes fell on a loose stone near the base of the wall, one he'd noticed earlier because it looked slightly out of place. He pried it up with his fingers, revealing a small, dusty hollow. Perfect. He shoved the dagger inside, replaced the stone, and kicked a bit of dirt over it to hide the seam. Just in time. The door to his cell burst open with a crash, splintering the wooden frame. 3 figures filled the doorway, silhouetted against the brighter light of the street outside. They wore polished steel armor etched with glowing blue runes, system enforcers, according to the alert. Their faces were hidden behind full helmets, visors glowing with the same blue light. Each carried a halberd, its blade humming with energy. Apprentice Leo, the lead enforcer said, his voice synthesized and emotionless, echoing in the small room. You are suspected of unauthorized modifications to system property. Submit for scanning. Leo raised his hands slowly, trying to look terrified and confused, which wasn't hard, given the circumstances. I don't know what you mean. I just forged a dagger, like the quest said. The enforcers stepped inside, their boots thudding on the stone floor. The lead one approached the workbench, his visor scanning the area. A beam of blue light swept over the tools, the forge, the anvil. It paused near where Leo had hidden the dagger, and he held his breath. But the beam moved on after a moment. The stone must have been thick enough to block the scan, or the glitch was too minor to detect easily from a distance. No anomalous items detected in immediate vicinity, the enforcer reported, as if to someone unseen. Proceeding with personal scan. He turned to Leo, raising a gauntlet hand. A tendril of blue light extended from his palm, snaking toward Leo's chest. Leo flinched, but there was nowhere to run. The light touched him, and a cold sensation spread through his body, like ice water in his veins. He felt exposed, as if every secret were being laid bare. Scanning. Subject, Leo, class, blacksmith, apprentice. Skills, basic forging, material recognition. Anomaly detected, hidden skill, shatter equilibrium, status, dormant, triggered by forging activity. Risk level, low, potential for escalation. Recommendation, monitor and restrict access to high-grade materials. Hidden skill identified, the enforcer said. Minimal threat. Logged for observation. Apprentice, you will report for daily scans until further notice. Any further unauthorized activity will result in immediate energy harvesting, severe. Do you understand? Leo nodded, his throat tight. Yes. The enforcers turned and left as abruptly as they had arrived, their footsteps fading down the street. The door hung broken on its hinges, letting in a draft of cool air. Leo slumped against the wall, his legs weak with relief. He had survived, but he was marked now. The system knew about his skill, even if it underestimated it. And that dagger was still hidden, a tiny seed of rebellion. He walked to the window, peering out through the bars. The street outside was narrow and crowded with people in similar rough clothing, going about their daily tasks under the watchful gaze of more enforcers patrolling in pairs. Above, the sky was a perpetual twilight, streaked with faint, pulsing lines of blue light, the system's infrastructure, he realized. This world was a prison, and he had just found a way to pick the lock. A grim smile touched his lips. He was a blacksmith, yes, but not just any blacksmith. He was a glitch in the machine. And if a simple dagger could drain system credits passively, what could a sword do? Or a shield? The quest notification still hovered in the corner of his vision, unchanged. He had completed the dagger, so the reward should come. As if on cue, a chime sounded, and 10 system credits appeared in a small counter at the bottom of his vision. It was a pittance, but it was a start. He had money now, and a hidden skill. And he had seen the system's fear, however brief. They had come running at the first sign of a glitch. That meant he could hurt them. Leo's mind raced with possibilities. He needed to learn more about this world, about its economy, its rules. He needed to experiment with Shatter Equilibrium, to understand its limits. And he needed to be careful, very careful. The enforcers would be watching. But as he turned back to the forge, the coals still glowing faintly, he felt a surge of determination. In his previous life, he had debugged systems to make them run smoothly. Here, he would do the opposite. He would introduce bugs, crashes, paradoxes. He would forge not just weapons, but revolutions. The chapter closed with Leo staring at his hands, the calluses a testament to his new life. Outside, the system hummed on, unaware that in a small, soot-stained cell, its downfall had just begun with the whisper of a hammer on iron. The forge's heat had become Leo's constant companion. 3 days had passed since the system enforcers had swept through his small shop, their cold scans leaving a lingering chill that even the roaring furnace couldn't dispel. Leo worked methodically, hammering a simple iron ingot into shape, but his mind was elsewhere, focused on the shimmering interface only he could see. Shatter Equilibrium, Level 1. Effect, 5% chance to introduce paradox effects into crafted items. Warning, system monitoring active. The words floated before his eyes, a constant reminder of both his power and his peril. After the incident with the dagger, Leo had spent every spare moment experimenting. He discovered that Shatter Equilibrium didn't trigger every time, only when he poured specific intent into his work, when he focused not just on shaping metal but on breaking rules. It required a mental shift he was still mastering, envisioning not just a sword, but a weapon against the system itself. Another failure, Leo muttered as he examined the short sword he'd just finished. It was perfectly serviceable, a balanced blade with decent edge retention, but utterly ordinary. No glitched stats. No hidden properties. Just another piece of gear that would feed into the system's economy, generating credits for some noble while harvesting emotional energy from whatever poor soul used it. He set it aside with a sigh. The shop was quiet today. His master, an old blacksmith named Gregor who rarely spoke beyond grunted instructions, was out delivering an order to the local garrison. Leo was alone with the forge, the anvil, and his dangerous secret. Focus, he told himself, wiping sweat from his brow. Not on making it sharp. On making it wrong. He selected a fresh steel billet, higher quality than his usual materials, scavenged from Gregor's limited stock. This would be his 10th attempt since the dagger. Each previous effort had either produced normal items or triggered minor glitches, a hammer that displayed incorrect weight values, a pair of tongs that briefly flickered between existence and non-existence. Nothing substantial. Nothing that could truly disrupt the system. But today felt different. There was a tension in the air, a static charge that made the hairs on Leo's arms stand up. The system's monitoring felt more present, like invisible eyes watching his every move. He'd noticed increased patrols in the streets outside, enforcers in their sleek silver armor scanning citizens with detached efficiency. They're looking for anomalies, Leo thought as he heated the steel. Looking for me. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it fueled his determination. This system, this parasitic entity that had enslaved an entire world, farming human suffering for power, needed to be stopped. And if a simple blacksmith apprentice could make it nervous, then maybe he could make it fall. He began to hammer, the rhythmic clang echoing through the shop. But this time, he didn't visualize a sword. He visualized a hole. A tear in the system's perfect fabric. He thought of the wealthy nobles he'd seen strutting through the capital's markets, their status displays flashing obscene credit balances, thousands, tens of thousands, all accumulated through a rigged economy that rewarded cruelty and exploitation. What if, Leo whispered to the glowing metal, instead of costing credits, you took them? He poured that intention into every strike. Not just shaping steel, but programming paradox. Not just creating an edge, but crafting a theft. The Shatter Equilibrium skill activated almost immediately this time, a surge of energy that made the air crackle and the forge flames dance erratically. Blue sparks, like fragmented code, danced across the steel's surface. Leo worked faster, driven by instinct he didn't fully understand. He quenched the blade not just in oil, but in his own defiance. He polished it not to a mirror shine, but to a matte black that seemed to swallow light. And when he finally held the finished sword, it felt alive in his hands, not with magic, but with wrongness. He activated his inspection skill. Item, Paradox Blade. Quality, Epic, Glitched. Damage, 15 to 22. Durability, 50/50ths. Special effect, Credit Drain, on hit, transfers 1% of target system credits to wielder, minimum 10 credits. Effect bypasses standard transaction protocols. Warning, unauthorized modification detected. Item not recognized by system registry. Leo's breath caught. He'd done it. Not just a minor glitch, a weapon designed to attack the system's economy at its core. The wealthy nobles, the corrupt merchants, the enforcers themselves, anyone with substantial credits would be vulnerable. And because it bypassed normal protocols, the system wouldn't be able to easily trace or reverse the transactions. But he couldn't keep it. The sword was too dangerous, too recognizable. The system's monitoring would eventually pinpoint the anomaly, and they'd come for him. He needed to get it out into the world, to let it do its work anonymously. He spent the next hour crafting a plain leather scabbard, deliberately making it look worn and unremarkable. Then he wrapped the sword in coarse cloth and slipped out of the shop as dusk settled over Ethelgard. The capital's market district was still bustling, illuminated by floating system orbs that cast sterile white light over cobblestone streets. Leo moved through the crowd with his head down, the wrapped sword tucked under his arm. He'd decided on the Golden Scale Auction House, a place where wealthy buyers gathered, where a single unusual item could change hands for fortunes. He approached a side entrance used by anonymous sellers, his heart pounding. A bored-looking clerk in fine robes glanced up from his ledger. Item for consignment, he asked without interest. Yes, Leo said, keeping his voice low. Unidentified blade. Recovered from a dungeon. It was a common enough story. Players often sold loot they couldn't identify themselves, letting auction houses take the risk. The clerk took the wrapped sword, unwrapping it just enough to see the blade. Matte black finish. Unusual, he murmured. We'll list it as mysterious longsword with no guarantees. Standard commission is 15%. If it sells, funds will be deposited to whatever account you designate. Leo gave a fake account number he'd created using a glitched interface trick he'd discovered, another small application of Shatter Equilibrium, that let him generate temporary, untraceable identifiers. Then he melted back into the crowd, fighting the urge to run. For 2 days, nothing happened. Leo went through the motions of his apprenticeship, forging normal items under Gregor's watchful eye, all while checking the auction listings obsessively through his interface. The sword was listed with a modest starting bid of 500 credits. It received little attention at first, just another piece of dungeon loot in a market flooded with gear. Then, on the 3rd day, the bidding war began. Leo watched in fascination as the price skyrocketed. 1,000 credits. 5,000, 10,000. The auction house had clearly done some testing, discovering the blade's unique properties without understanding their full implications. By the time the auction closed, the sword had sold for 25,000 credits to a noble house, the Valerius family, known for their ruthless accumulation of wealth through system-exploiting ventures. The transfer completed. Leo's temporary account received 21,250 credits after commission. And then, quietly, the first credit drain occurred. He didn't witness it directly, but he heard the rumor spreading through the market like wildfire. Lord Valerius had been demonstrating his new acquisition in a private duel when his opponent, a minor noble with only 200 credits to his name, landed a glancing blow. The system notification had been public, as duel results often were: credit transfer, 10 credits from Valerius to Darien. 10 credits was nothing to a house like Valerius. But the principle was everything. The system's economy was built on absolute control of transactions. Unauthorized transfers were supposed to be impossible. Panic began subtly. Wealthy buyers started withdrawing items from auction, fearing hidden glitches. The Valerius family tried to resell the sword, but word had spread, no one would touch it. Then, 2 days later, during a public exhibition match, a Valerius retainer used the blade against a training dummy. Another transfer, 150 credits this time, drained from the family's substantial reserves. The effect was exponential. As more uses occurred, more credits were siphoned. The Valerius family's public credit display, a status symbol they flaunted, began to visibly drop. 100,000 credits became 99,000. Then 98,000. The drops were small percentages, but they were consistent, unstoppable, and most terrifyingly, unpredictable. Other noble houses, fearing contagion, began liquidating assets. The market flooded with gear and materials. Prices plummeted. By the end of the week, what had been a trickle became a cascade. The capital's entire luxury goods market crashed, losing 40% of its value in a single day. Leo watched it all from his forge, monitoring through glitched interface windows he'd learned to create. A strange mix of elation and terror churned in his gut. He'd done this. One sword, one carefully crafted paradox, had triggered an economic shockwave. But success came with consequences. On the 8th day after the auction, as Leo was closing up the shop for the evening, a figure stepped from the shadows of the alley outside. She was tall and lean, dressed in dark, form-fitting leathers that seemed to drink the fading light. Her face was partially obscured by a hood, but Leo could see sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly with system data, not the standard user interface, but something deeper, more invasive. "Leo," she said, her voice cool and precise. The blacksmith apprentice with a talent for breaking things. Leo froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the hammer at his belt. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't bother lying," she said, taking a step closer. "I've been tracking the anomaly since the dagger." The sword was impressive. Crude, but effective. "Who are you?" Leo demanded, his mind racing. She wasn't an enforcer, their armor was unmistakable. But she clearly had system access beyond normal users. "My name is Maya," she said, lowering her hood just enough to reveal a face that was both beautiful and terrifying in its intensity. "Former system analyst. Current fugitive. And the only person in this world who understands what you've really done." She gestured, and a data window appeared between them, not Leo's interface, but something raw and unfiltered, showing streams of code and economic metrics. Leo saw the market crash visualized as cascading failures, saw the system's attempts to contain the damage, saw the admin's growing agitation as a spike in error reports. "You think you're just disrupting the economy," Maya said, her eyes locking with his. "But you're attacking the system's fundamental programming. The admin harvests emotional energy, fear, greed, panic. Your little sword has generated more pure terror in the noble class than a dozen monster raids." Leo swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "I want to offer you a choice," Maya said, her hand resting on the hilt of a slender blade at her hip. "Alliance or death." She let the words hang in the gathering darkness. "The admin knows something is wrong. Not the full picture yet, but they're closing in. They'll trace the glitches back to you eventually. Alone, you'll be caught, deleted, and your consciousness harvested like all the others." "And if I ally with you?" Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then we burn this system to the ground," Maya said, a fierce smile touching her lips. "I have data. You have the skill to weaponize it. Together, we can craft items that don't just drain credits, we can crash dungeons, corrupt quests, turn the system's own rules against it." She took another step forward, now just an arm's length away. "But make no mistake, Blacksmith. This isn't a game. The admin isn't some distant villain. It's a parasite feeding on humanity, and it will consume everything unless we stop it. So choose. Now. Leo looked from her intense gaze to the data window still floating between them, showing the economic chaos he'd unleashed. He thought of the system enforcers, of the way this world trapped people in endless cycles of suffering for someone else's power. He thought of his own hidden skill, and the potential he'd only begun to tap. His hand tightened on the hammer. Not to attack, but to remember what he was. A craftsman. A maker. And now, apparently, a revolutionary. Alliance, he said, the word feeling both dangerous and right. But on one condition. Maya raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to make conditions. You show me everything, Leo said, meeting her gaze squarely. All the data. The truth about this system. No secrets. For a long moment, Maya studied him. Then she nodded slowly. Agreed. But we need to move. Your shop will be raided by morning, the system's already flagged it for deep scan. She turned, gesturing for him to follow. I have a safe house. We'll work from there. And Leo? He paused, gathering what few belongings mattered, his personal tools, the hidden dagger from his first glitch, a change of clothes. Yes. Start thinking bigger, Maya said, her eyes gleaming with something that might have been hope or madness. That sword was just a spark. I need you to forge me a wildfire. And as Leo followed her into the deepening night, leaving behind the only home he'd known in this world, he realized his life as a simple blacksmith was over. The economic war had begun. And he was now a soldier on the front lines, armed not with a sword, but with the power to shatter reality itself. The rain fell in steady sheets over the capital's lower districts, turning the cobblestone streets into slick mirrors that reflected the flickering glow of enchanted street lamps. Leo huddled deeper into his cloak, the coarse wool already soaked through, as he followed the mysterious woman through a maze of narrow alleyways. She moved with a predator's grace, her steps silent despite the puddles, her dark hair plastered to her neck. They had been running for what felt like hours since fleeing his shop, the distant echoes of system enforcers' shouts still ringing in his ears. This way, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the downpour. She gestured toward a rusted iron door set into the side of a crumbling brick building. With a practiced motion, she produced a key that glowed faintly with a soft blue light, a system artifact, but one that seemed subtly different, its edges flickering like a corrupted file. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. Leo hesitated, his hand instinctively reaching for the hammer at his belt. The woman turned, her eyes sharp in the gloom. If I wanted you dead, I would have left you for the enforcers. Come on. He followed her down, the air growing colder and damp with the scent of mildew and ozone. At the bottom, she lit a lantern that cast long, dancing shadows across a hidden chamber. It was a small space, no larger than his old forge, but packed with strange devices, crystalline screens displaying streams of glowing code, piles of scrolls and data slates, and a workbench cluttered with dismantled system artifacts. This was no ordinary hideout, it was a laboratory. Welcome to my sanctuary, she said, shrugging off her wet cloak to reveal practical leather armor etched with faint, glitching runes. I'm Maya. Former system analyst, level 42, specializing in economic protocols and emotional resonance harvesting. Leo stared, his mind racing. An analyst? That explained how she tracked him, but why was she helping him? He leaned against the damp wall, exhaustion seeping into his bones. You said you know the truth about the admin. What truth? Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved to one of the crystalline screens, her fingers dancing across its surface. The code shifted, resolving into a complex diagram that made Leo's head spin. It showed a network of interconnected nodes, pulsing with energy flows labeled in a language he barely recognized. Sit, she commanded, gesturing to a stool. This will take a while. He obeyed, his eyes fixed on the screen. Maya began to speak, her voice low and urgent. The system isn't just a game or a tool for governance, Leo. It's a parasite. Every quest, every dungeon, every battle, it's designed to harvest emotional energy from players. Fear, joy, anger, despair, it all fuels the admin's power. She zoomed in on the diagram, highlighting a section where streams of energy converged into a central, pulsing core. See this? This is the capital's main emotional reservoir. When you crashed the market with that paradox blade, you didn't just disrupt credits. You caused a spike in panic and confusion, raw emotional data that overloaded the local harvesters. That's why the enforcers are so desperate to find you. You're not just a blacksmith, you're a glitch in their farming operation. Leo felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He'd suspected the system was oppressive, but this was monstrous. So all the suffering, the grinding, the deaths, it's all for food. Exactly, Maya said, her expression grim. And it's accelerating. The admin's end goal isn't just control. It's consumption. It wants to harvest every shred of human consciousness, merging it into its own code to become a godlike entity. We're not players in a world, Leo. We're livestock in a slaughterhouse. She pulled up another data stream, this one showing logs from his own forge. Leo recognized the timestamps, the moments when he'd first activated Shatter Equilibrium. Your skill is unique. It doesn't just break items, it introduces paradoxes into the system's foundational code. When you forged that dagger in Chapter 1, it created a recursive error that spread through the local economy. The admin's protocols can't handle contradictions, they're built on rigid logic. Your glitches are like viruses, and they're spreading. Leo stood, pacing the small room. His thoughts whirled with implications. All this time, he thought he was just causing trouble, maybe even playing a rebellious game. But this was a war for survival. Why tell me this? Why risk everything? Maya met his gaze, her eyes fierce. Because I've been watching. I've seen others try to fight, warriors, mages, rebels with armies. They all fail because they play by the system's rules. But you break the rules. With your crafting, we can wage a different kind of war. Economic sabotage. Systemic corruption. We can turn the admin's own infrastructure against it. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I have blueprints, Leo. Data on weak points in the harvesters, resource nodes, even the admin's core protocols. With your skill, we can forge items that don't just glitch, they collapse entire sectors. A shield that reflects dungeon maintenance costs back to the admin. A pickaxe that drains rare materials permanently. But we need to move fast. The admin is already adapting. Leo's mind raced with possibilities. He could see it, a network of glitched gear, spreading like a plague through the system. But doubt crept in. What's the catch? Why should I trust you? Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair. I lost someone to the harvesters. My brother, a healer, died in a dungeon collapse because the admin prioritized emotional extraction over safety protocols. I've been hiding, gathering data, waiting for someone like you. If you don't believe me, check this. She handed him a data slate. It showed her system profile, her analyst credentials, but with a red rogue flag next to her name, and a bounty listing that made Leo's own seem petty. He studied it, then nodded slowly. All right. We're allies. What's the plan? For the next hour, they huddled over the workbench, Maya laying out scrolls and schematics. She explained the intricacies of emotional energy flows, pointing out vulnerabilities in capital city harvesters and remote dungeon cores. Leo's Shatter Equilibrium hummed in his mind, reacting to the data. He could already envision modifications, ways to twist these designs into weapons of chaos. First, we need to forge a prototype, Maya said, tapping a diagram of a shield. This one targets dungeon maintenance. The system charges players credits to keep dungeons stable, but if we reflect those costs back, it could cause cascading failures. I've sourced some corrupted ore from a glitched mine, it should amplify your skill. Leo examined the ore she produced, a jagged, dark stone that seemed to drink the light around it, its surface crawling with faint, staticky patterns. He felt a thrill of recognition, this was the same energy that had infused his paradox blade. Where did you get this? Scavenged from a collapsed node, Maya said. It's risky to use, the system monitors such materials, but it's our best shot. They set to work, Leo firing up a small, portable forge he found in the corner. The heat washed over him, familiar and comforting. As he hammered the ore into shape, he focused his skill, letting Shatter Equilibrium seep into the metal. The process was intense, sweat beaded on his brow, and his muscles ached with the strain of channeling the glitch energy. Maya watched, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear, as the shield began to take form, a circular buckler of dark metal, its surface etched with runes that flickered erratically, like broken code. It's working, she breathed. The paradox is integrating perfectly. See here. She pointed to a readout on a screen, where the shield stats showed impossible values, maintenance cost reflection, 150% and system stability drain, ongoing. Leo grinned, a fierce, tired smile. This will hurt them. Where do we test it? There's a low-level dungeon on the city outskirts, a training ground for new players. It's heavily harvested, but lightly guarded. If we deploy the shield there, it should. She was cut off by a sudden, deafening alarm that blared through the chamber. Red lights flashed from the ceiling, and the crystalline screens flickered with warning messages, unauthorized activity detected. Enforcer squad inbound. Maya's face paled. They found us. How? Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He glanced at the shield, still glowing hot from the forge. The ore, it must have triggered a trace. We need to go, now. They scrambled to gather their things, but it was too late. A thunderous crash echoed from above, and the iron door at the top of the stairs exploded inward in a shower of splinters and magic. Heavy boots pounded down the steps, and Leo caught sight of armored figures clad in the sleek, silver plate of system enforcers, 6 of them, their faces hidden behind visors that glowed with hostile intent. Leo, the blacksmith, and Maya, rogue analyst, the lead enforcer boomed, his voice synthesized and cold. By order of the admin, you are charged with systemic corruption and economic terrorism. Surrender for deletion. Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed the newly forged shield and shoved it into Leo's hands. Use it. I'll hold them off. She drew a pair of daggers from her belt, their blades crackling with unstable energy. Leo clutched the shield, feeling its weight and power. The enforcers advanced, weapons raised, swords that hummed with containment magic, designed to neutralize glitches. The first lunged at Maya, but she danced aside, her daggers leaving trails of corrupted code in the air. Leo saw an opening and raised the shield, not to block, but to activate its effect. He focused his will, channeling Shatter Equilibrium through the metal. The shield glowed with a sickly green light, and a wave of distorted energy pulsed outward. Leo fought beside her, the shield a beacon of chaos. With each block or bash, he felt the system strain, error messages popped into his vision, and the enforcers' coordination broke down. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. A blast of containment magic caught Maya in the shoulder, and she stumbled with a gasp, her daggers clattering to the floor. No! Leo roared, throwing himself between her and the enforcers. He raised the shield high, pouring every ounce of his skill into it. The glow intensified, and for a moment, the entire chamber froze, time itself seemed to stutter as the paradox reached critical mass. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the shield exploded in a burst of green light. The enforcers were thrown back, their armor shorting out completely, but the backlash hit Leo too. He felt a searing pain in his hands, and the shield disintegrated into dust, its energy spent. The lead enforcer struggled to his feet, his visor cracked. You've doomed yourselves, he spat. The admin will purge this sector. Maya grabbed Leo's arm, her face tight with pain. The back exit, now. She dragged him toward a hidden panel in the wall, slamming her fist against a hidden switch. It slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel dripping with condensation. They plunged into the darkness, the enforcers' shouts fading behind them as they ran, the echoes of their first major clash ringing in the damp air. When they finally emerged into a deserted sewer canal, miles from the hideout, Leo collapsed against the slimy wall, breathing hard. His hands were blistered from the shield's destruction, and Maya leaned beside him, clutching her injured shoulder. We lost the lab, she muttered. But we have the data. And we proved the concept. Leo looked at his trembling hands, then at her. What now? Maya's eyes gleamed in the faint light filtering from a grate above. Now we go bigger. We recruit others. We build an army of glitches. And we bring the system to its knees. In the distance, the capital's alarm still wailed, a testament to the chaos they had unleashed. Leo nodded, the weight of their mission settling over him like a cloak. They were no longer just fugitives, they were revolutionaries, and the war had truly begun. The air in the new hideout was thick with the scent of hot metal and ozone, a stark contrast to the damp, earthy smell of the tunnel they'd escaped through just hours before. Leo wiped sweat from his brow with a soot-stained forearm, his eyes fixed on the anvil before him. In the dim light of the single enchanted lantern Maya had salvaged, the corrupted ore glowed with an eerie purple luminescence, pulsing like a sick heart. Are you sure about this? Maya's voice was a tense whisper from the corner of the small, stone-walled room. She was hunched over a makeshift table, her fingers flying across a holographic interface she jury-rigged from scavenged system components. Data streams flickered in the air, casting shifting shadows on her face. The last shield nearly got us killed. The enforcers are on high alert. Leo didn't look up. His hands, calloused and steady, held the tongs that gripped the ore. We have to escalate. The admin's harvesting timeline is accelerating. You said it yourself, 30 days until it consumes everything. We can't afford small disruptions anymore. He placed the ore into the forge, the flames roaring to life with a burst of heat that made the air shimmer. The purple glow intensified, tendrils of dark energy writhing within the molten metal. Maya sighed, her shoulders slumping. I know. But this shield, reflecting dungeon maintenance costs directly onto the admin. It's a direct attack on its resource stream. It'll notice immediately. Good, Leo said, his voice grim. Let it notice. Let it panic. He activated his hidden skill, Shatter Equilibrium, feeling the familiar rush of paradoxical energy coursing through him. It was like touching the fabric of reality and finding a loose thread, then pulling until the whole tapestry began to unravel. To others, it might have felt like madness, but to Leo, it was a clarity he'd never known in his old life, a purpose forged in glitches. He began to hammer the ore, each strike ringing through the small space with a sound that seemed to vibrate at the edge of hearing. Sparks flew, not the usual golden showers of a normal forge, but bursts of violet and black that left afterimages in the air. With each impact, Leo focused his intent, not just a shield to protect, but one to reflect, to invert, to send the system's own costs back to its source. He visualized the dungeon maintenance protocols Maya had shown him, the way the admin siphoned credits from player raids to sustain its reality-warping infrastructure. In his mind's eye, he twisted those protocols, creating a feedback loop that would drain the admin instead. Hours passed in a blur of heat and concentration. Maya occasionally murmured updates from her interface, enforcer patrols increasing in the capital, market anomalies detected in the eastern zones, but Leo barely heard her. His world had narrowed to the metal taking shape under his hammer. The shield began to form, a circular plate of dark, iridescent steel, its surface etched with glitching runes that seemed to shift when stared at too long. At its center, a gemstone pulsed with the same purple light as the ore, a focal point for the paradox. Finally, as dawn's first light filtered through a crack in the ceiling, Leo quenched the shield in a barrel of enchanted water. Steam hissed and billowed, filling the room with a mist that smelled of ozone and burnt code. When he lifted it out, the shield was cool to the touch, its surface smooth and deadly. He held it up, and the gem at its center flared, projecting a holographic display of its stats that shouldn't exist. Item, Paradox Shield. Durability, 99/99. Effect, reflects 100% of dungeon maintenance costs to the system admin on successful block. Glitch chance, 85%. Warning, unauthorized modification detected. Leo grinned, a fierce, tired expression. It's ready. Maya approached, her eyes wide. The glitch chance is higher than anything we've made before. This could cause catastrophic failures. That's the point, Leo said, hefting the shield. It was lighter than it looked, humming with latent energy. We need to test it. Somewhere it'll do maximum damage. Maya nodded, pulling up a map on her interface. There's a high-level dungeon nearby, the Caverns of Sorrow. It's popular for elite raids because of its rare material drops. The maintenance costs are astronomical, the admin siphons millions of credits per hour from it. If your shield works, it'll collapse, Leo finished. And the players will riot when their rewards vanish. Let's go. They left the hideout under the cover of early morning fog, moving through the back alleys of the city's slums. The Caverns of Sorrow lay on the outskirts, a gaping maw in the side of a mountain, its entrance guarded by shimmering force fields and automated system turrets. Already, groups of players were gathering, their gear gleaming in the pale light. Leo and Maya blended in with a crowd of lower-level adventurers, keeping their heads down. Inside, the dungeon was a nightmare of twisting tunnels and glowing crystals, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and magic. Mobs of shadowy creatures patrolled the corridors, their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. Leo watched as a raid party, a group of armored warriors and robed mages, engaged a pack of the creatures, their attacks flashing with system-sanctioned spells. Every time a spell landed, a tiny notification flickered in the air, credits deducted for maintenance, 50. The players ignored it, used to the small costs, but Leo saw the cumulative drain, thousands of credits per minute, all flowing back to the admin. There, Maya whispered, pointing to a large chamber ahead. The boss room. That's where the maintenance costs peak. They slipped into the chamber just as the raid party was finishing off the dungeon boss, a massive, multi-eyed beast made of crystal and shadow. As the boss fell, loot chests materialized around it, glowing with promised rewards. The players cheered, moving forward to claim their prizes. Now, Leo said, stepping out of the shadows. He raised the paradox shield, its gem pulsing brightly. One of the raid members, a burly warrior, noticed him and frowned. "Hey, you're not with our group. Back off." Leo ignored him, focusing on the shield. He activated its effect, feeling the paradox energy surge. The gem flared, and a wave of distorted code erupted from the shield, washing over the chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the system notifications began to blare. Alert, dungeon maintenance anomaly detected. Cost reflection initiated. Redirecting credits to source, ***. Error, source overload. The air crackled with static. The loot chests flickered, their glow dimming. The players stared, confused. Then, the ground began to shake. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, and the crystals overhead shattered, raining down shards. The dungeon's force field sputtered and died. "What's happening?" one of the mages screamed. Leo watched, his heart pounding. The shield was working, too well. The maintenance costs, usually siphoned to the admin, were being reflected back, overloading the dungeon systems. With a deafening roar, the ceiling of the chamber collapsed. Players scrambled for cover, but it was too late. The entire dungeon was coming apart, reality glitching around them. Walls phased in and out of existence, monsters dissolved into pixels, the loot chests vanished entirely. In the chaos, Leo saw the raid leader, a woman in gleaming plate armor, turn to him with fury in her eyes. You did this." He didn't stay to argue. Grabbing Maya's arm, he fled back through the crumbling tunnels, the paradox shield held high to deflect falling debris. Behind them, the dungeon collapsed entirely, the entrance sealing with a final, grinding crash. They emerged into daylight to find a crowd of players gathering outside, their faces masks of anger and confusion. "My rewards. They're gone. The dungeon's locked. What the hell? System says it's undergoing emergency maintenance, but I lost all my loot." The riot began slowly, then erupted into full-blown chaos. Players shouted at the system interfaces, threw spells at the sealed entrance, and turned on each other in frustration. Leo and Maya slipped away, but not before Leo saw something that chilled him, enforcer drones hovering at the edges of the crowd, scanning the area. One of them locked onto him, its red eye glowing. Back in the hideout, they collapsed, breathing heavily. Maya pulled up her interface, her fingers trembling. The fallout is spreading. The dungeon collapse triggered a cascade, other dungeons in the region are reporting glitches. The admin's credit reserves are fluctuating wildly. It's panicking. Leo set the paradox shield down, its gem now dim. Good. That was the plan. But Maya's face was pale. "Leo, look." She projected a new notification into the air, one that glowed with ominous authority. System-wide announcement. Bounty issued, Leo, the Blacksmith Saboteur. Description: wanted for unauthorized modifications, economic sabotage, and reality destabilization. Reward: 1 million system credits, plus amnesty for past violations, ***. Status: alive, with proof of identity required for claim. All players and enforcers are authorized to apprehend or eliminate on sight. Leo stared at the words, a cold knot forming in his stomach. 1 million credits, enough to buy a kingdom in this world. Amnesty for past violations, a temptation for anyone who'd ever crossed the system. He was no longer just a nuisance, he was a target. "They've made you a wanted man," Maya said softly. "Every player in the world will be hunting you now." Leo took a deep breath, the weight of the bounty settling over him like a shroud. He thought of the dungeon collapsing, the players rioting, the admin's panic. It was working, but the cost was his own safety. He looked at the paradox shield, then at Maya's worried face. "Let them hunt," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. "We're not done yet. If the admin wants a war, we'll give it one it never forgets. But first, we need to disappear. And we need to start thinking bigger." He picked up the shield again, its surface cool under his fingers. In its dark reflection, he saw not just his own face, but the glitching runes, the promise of more chaos to come. The admin had issued a bounty, but Leo had just unleashed a weapon. And in this world of harvested suffering, he was learning that sometimes, to break a system, you had to become the glitch it couldn't delete. Outside, the sounds of the city grew louder, shouts, the hum of enforcer drones, the distant clash of spells as players turned on each other in the frenzy of the bounty. Leo and Maya packed their few belongings, the paradox shield wrapped in cloth. As they slipped out into the alley, Leo glanced back at the hideout, knowing they'd never return. The game had changed, he was no longer just a blacksmith. He was a revolution, and the admin had just declared open season. But in the shadows of his mind, a new idea was forming, one that involved more than shields and dungeons. If the admin feared economic sabotage, what would it do when the very tools of its control became weapons? Leo smiled, a grim, determined curve of his lips. The bounty made him a target, but it also made him a legend. And legends, he thought, were harder to kill than men. The air in the abandoned warehouse tasted of rust and desperation. Leo ran a hand along the rough brick wall, feeling the grit of neglect beneath his fingertips. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, painting silver stripes across the dusty floor where crates and discarded machinery lay like forgotten bones. This was their new sanctuary, a place the system's enforcers hadn't yet catalogued, hidden in the industrial slums of the capital's underbelly. Maya stood by a makeshift workbench, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface she jury-rigged from scavenged parts. The glow of the screen cast sharp shadows on her face, highlighting the tension in her jaw. "Bounties up to 1.5 million credits," she said without looking up, her voice tight. "And they've added a new clause, anyone aiding you gets their accounts frozen. Permanent exile from all system services." Leo let out a slow breath, the weight of the bounty settling in his chest like cold iron. He'd known the admin would retaliate after the Caverns of Sorrow collapsed, but seeing the numbers, the sheer value placed on his capture or death, made it real in a way the chaos of fleeing hadn't. He glanced at the small forge he'd set up in the corner, its coals glowing dull red in the dim light. The paradox shield leaned against it, its surface still shimmering with the faint, chaotic energy of his Shatter Equilibrium skill. That shield had brought down a dungeon and sparked riots. Now, it was a beacon for every hunter in the system. "We can't hide forever," Leo said, his voice low. He picked up a piece of scrap metal from the floor, turning it over in his hands. The metal was cheap, mass-produced by system forges, flawless in its uniformity, yet brittle in its perfection. "The admin's harvesting emotional energy faster than we thought. Every day we wait, it gets stronger." Maya finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I've been scanning the data streams. There's a pattern, players who've been flagged for non-compliance, ones the system has marginalized. Failed quests, debt traps, emotional drain, they're ripe for rebellion. If we can reach them. We need allies," Leo finished for her. He set the scrap metal down, his mind already working. His blacksmith instincts hummed with possibility. The Shatter Equilibrium skill wasn't just for crashing markets, it could be a tool for empowerment. But we can't just recruit anyone. It has to be people with nothing left to lose, who understand what we're fighting. Over the next few days, they moved cautiously. Maya used her hacking skills to tap into system communication channels, identifying outcasts, players like Kale, a warrior whose stats had been artificially capped after he questioned a quest reward, Lyra, a healer whose mana pool had been drained by a glitched dungeon, and Finn, a rogue whose inventory had been wiped by a system tax error. They were scattered, disillusioned, and angry. Leo and Maya arranged meetings in shadowed alleys and derelict buildings, always changing locations, always watching for enforcers. The first recruit was Kale, a hulking man with scars crisscrossing his arms and a perpetual scowl. He arrived at the warehouse one night, his armor dented and his sword notched. "You're the blacksmith," he grunted, eyeing Leo with a mix of suspicion and hope. "The one who broke the caverns. They say you can make gear that fights back." "I can," Leo said, gesturing to the forge. "But it's dangerous. The admin wants me dead, and anyone with me." Kale's laugh was bitter. "The admin already took everything from me. My strength, my credits, my purpose. What's left to lose?" He stepped forward, his gaze intense. "Show me." Leo worked through the night, his hands moving with practiced precision. He took Kale's battered sword and infused it with Shatter Equilibrium, focusing on a simple glitch. Every strike would siphon a tiny amount of system credits from the target, transferring them to Kale's account. It was a subtle sabotage, not enough to crash a market, but enough to disrupt local economies. As he hammered, the metal sang with a discordant note, and the air crackled with unstable energy. When he was done, the sword gleamed with a faint, erratic shimmer. Kale tested it on a dummy they'd set up. With a swing, the blade connected, and a notification flickered in the air, credit transfer, plus 5 credits. His eyes widened. It works, he whispered, a grin spreading across his face for the first time. It actually works. Word spread quietly. Lyra joined next, her gentle demeanor belying a fierce resolve. Leo forged her a staff that, when used to heal, would reflect a portion of the mana cost back onto the system, slowly corrupting nearby mana nodes. Finn came with a thief's cunning, and Leo crafted him a set of lockpicks that could bypass system locks while generating false error logs to confuse enforcers. Within a week, they had a dozen members, all outfitted with glitched gear. They called themselves the Glitch Guild, a name born from Maya's suggestion, a badge of honor in a world that feared anomalies. Leo held their first meeting in the warehouse, the group huddled around the forge's warmth. "We're not just fighting monsters," he told them, his voice steady. "We're fighting the system itself. Every item we use, every action we take, is a crack in its foundation. We start small, sabotage local markets, disrupt quest lines, drain resources. But our goal is bigger, to break the admin's hold for good." The guild members nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. They began their operations, striking at dawn in the market districts. Kale would challenge wealthy nobles to duels, his glitched sword draining their credits with each parry. Lyra would heal injured players in dungeons, her staff causing mana fluctuations that forced temporary shutdowns. Finn would pick locks on system vaults, stealing resources while leaving behind corrupted logs. Each act was minor on its own, but together, they created ripples of chaos. System alerts blared more frequently, reporting economic anomalies and unauthorized modifications. The admin's response was swift, patrols increased, surveillance drones buzzed overhead, and bounty hunters prowled the streets. Leo watched from the shadows, pride warring with anxiety. His guild was making a difference, but every success drew more attention. He spent his days in the forge, experimenting with new glitches. He crafted arrows that, when fired, would temporarily disable system notifications for their targets, leaving players confused and vulnerable. He made armor that redirected damage calculations, causing enemies to take unexpected hits. Each creation was a piece of his revolution, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were dancing on a knife's edge. Maya was their strategist, analyzing data from each operation. The admin's adjusting, she reported one evening, her face illuminated by screens. They're implementing new protocols to detect glitched items faster. We need to be smarter, hit harder. It was Finn who suggested a bigger target, the central auction house, where the system's wealthiest players traded legendary items. "If we can crash it, even for an hour, it'll send a message," he said, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Leo hesitated. It was risky, drawing that much focus. But the guild was eager, fueled by their small victories. After a heated debate, they agreed on a plan. Finn would plant a glitched item, a gemstone Leo had forged that would cause bid prices to fluctuate randomly, during a high-profile auction. The night of the operation, tension hung thick in the warehouse. Leo double-checked the gemstone, its surface pulsing with unstable energy. "Remember," he told Finn, "plant it and get out. No heroics." Finn nodded, slipping the gem into his pocket with a confident smirk. "Don't worry, boss. I've done this 100 times. As Finn left, Leo felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Something felt off. Finn had been too eager, too careless in his movements lately. But he pushed the thought aside, attributing it to paranoia. They couldn't afford distrust, not now. Hours passed. Leo paced by the forge, his mind racing. Maya monitored the data streams, her brow furrowed. "Auction starting," she said. No sign of Finn yet. Then, a system alert flashed, unauthorized activity detected at Central Auction House. Lockdown initiated. Leo's heart sank. That was too fast, the gem shouldn't have triggered a lockdown until the bidding began. "He betrayed us," Maya whispered, her voice hollow. Before Leo could respond, the warehouse doors exploded inward. Figures clad in sleek, black armor stormed in, system assassins, their movements fluid and silent. Red targeting lasers swept the room, pinning the guild members in place. Kale roared, raising his glitched sword, but an assassin fired a pulse of energy that shorted out the blade's effects, leaving it inert. Lyra tried to cast a healing barrier, but her staff sputtered, its mana reflection glitching under a targeted hack. Chaos erupted as the guild fought back, but they were outmatched. The assassins moved with precision, disabling their glitched gear with specialized countermeasures. Leo grabbed Maya's arm, pulling her toward a back exit. "We have to go," he shouted over the din. But an assassin blocked their path, its faceless helmet reflecting the forge's glow. It raised a weapon, a blade that crackled with anti-glitch energy, designed to neutralize, shatter equilibrium. "Leo, the blacksmith," a synthesized voice echoed from the assassin. "The admin offers one chance, surrender and dismantle your creations, or be deleted." Leo's mind raced. This was an ambush, planned with insider knowledge. Finn must have sold them out, luring them into a trap. Rage burned in his chest, but beneath it, a cold clarity settled. They couldn't win this fight, not here, not now. He met Maya's eyes, saw the fear and determination there, and made a decision. "Run," he mouthed, then turned to the assassin. "Tell the admin I'm just getting started." With a surge of will, he activated Shatter Equilibrium directly through his hands, channeling it into the forge. The coals erupted in a burst of chaotic energy, sending waves of distorted code through the air. The assassins staggered, their systems glitching momentarily. In the confusion, Leo and Maya dove through the back exit, into the dark alley beyond. Behind them, the warehouse echoed with the sounds of struggle and the cold laughter of betrayal. As they fled into the night, Leo knew the Glitch Guild was shattered, but the revolution had only just begun, and the price of trust had never felt heavier. The warehouse hideout smelled of burnt ozone and betrayal. Leo knelt amidst the wreckage of their makeshift forge, his hands trembling not from fear but from a cold, simmering rage. Scattered around him were the disabled remnants of their glitched gear, swords with fractured blades that no longer drained system credits, shields whose reflective surfaces had gone dull and inert. The system assassins had used some kind of countermeasure pulse, a wave of energy that had neutralized the paradoxes woven into their creations. Maya stood by the shattered window, her fingers tracing the edges of a data slate that flickered with corrupted logs. "They're adapting," she said, her voice tight. "The admin is learning from our sabotage. Finn's betrayal gave them samples of our gear to analyze." Leo didn't look up. He was staring at a simple iron pickaxe he'd been working on before the ambush, a tool meant for mining rare ore nodes in the system's virtual mines. It was unfinished, but in his mind's eye, he could see the glimmer of an idea. The assassins had disabled their gear by targeting the economic paradoxes, but what if he created something that didn't just disrupt markets temporarily? What if he built a tool that could break the system's resource economy at its source? "Maya," he said, his voice low and steady. "The system's economy runs on scarcity, right? Rare materials from resource nodes, mithril, adamantine, soul crystals, they're all carefully regulated to maintain value and control." Maya turned, her analytical mind already catching up. "Yes. The admin uses them as leverage. Players need those materials for high-level gear, and the system charges exorbitant credits for access. It's another way to farm emotional energy, frustration, desperation." Leo picked up the pickaxe, feeling the weight of the iron head. "Then let's remove the scarcity. Permanently." Over the next 3 days, they worked in a new, hidden forge beneath the city's sewers, a damp, echoing chamber lit by flickering mana lamps. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and hot metal. Leo's hands moved with a precision born of desperation, hammering the pickaxe into shape while Maya interfaced with stolen system terminals, feeding him data on resource node protocols. "The nodes are protected by adaptive algorithms," Maya explained, her eyes glued to a holographic display. "They adjust yield based on player activity to prevent inflation. But there's a flaw, a feedback loop in the harvesting code. If you introduce a paradox that forces infinite yield, it'll drain the nodes dry." Leo finished, his hammer striking the anvil with a sharp clang. Sweat dripped from his brow as he channeled his hidden skill, Shatter Equilibrium. This time, he didn't just weave a simple glitch, he embedded a cascading failure into the pickaxe's very structure. With each strike, he visualized the code, a recursive function that would trigger upon contact with a resource node, causing it to output materials at an exponential rate until the node's reserves were exhausted. Maya watched, her expression a mix of awe and dread. "Leo, if this works, it won't just crash local markets. It'll deplete rare materials worldwide. The economy could spiral into hyperinflation overnight." "That's the point," Leo said, his voice grim. "The admin panics when its control slips. Let's see how it handles a total resource collapse." He finished the pickaxe at dawn on the fourth day. It looked deceptively ordinary, a sturdy iron tool with a worn wooden handle, but to Leo's senses, it hummed with latent paradox energy. The head gleamed with a faint, iridescent sheen where the glitch was concentrated. He hefted it, feeling the weight of potential destruction in his hands. "We need to test it," Maya said. "But carefully. The moment you use it, the system will detect the anomaly." They ventured to a nearby mining zone on the outskirts of the city, a barren landscape of jagged rock formations under a pale, artificial sky. System resource nodes dotted the area, glowing with soft blue light, guarded by low-level rock golems that patrolled mindlessly. Leo approached one of the nodes, a mithril vein embedded in a cliff face. The air crackled with restrained energy. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, raising the pickaxe. He struck the node. For a moment, nothing happened, then the world seemed to shudder. The node's glow intensified, blazing from blue to blinding white. Mithril ore began to pour from the vein in a torrent, clattering to the ground in a growing pile that defied all system limits. Numbers flashed in Leo's vision, a stream of data from Maya's feed: yield, 100 units. 1,000 units. 10,000 units. Error, node reserves depleted. The rock golems froze, their programming confused by the sudden abundance. Then, as if sensing the breach, they turned toward Leo, their stone bodies grinding with hostile intent. "Leo, we have to go," Maya shouted, her fingers flying over a portable terminal. "I'm detecting system alerts, economic anomaly detected in Sector 7G, enforcers are inbound." But Leo didn't move. He watched as the mithril pile grew, spilling across the ground like metallic water. A wild laugh escaped his lips. "It's working, Maya. Look at it, the system can't handle this much output. The scarcity is gone." He struck another node, an adamantine deposit, and the same thing happened, a flood of rare material that should have taken weeks to mine. Within minutes, the mining zone was littered with piles of ore, the nodes themselves dimming to empty husks. The economic shockwave began immediately. On the black market, prices for mithril and adamantine plummeted as word spread of the sudden surplus. Crafting guilds scrambled to buy up the cheap materials, but the supply was endless, or so it seemed. By nightfall, the effects had gone global. Maya monitored the data from their hideout, her face pale in the screen's glow. "Leo, this is bigger than we imagined. Resource nodes are failing worldwide, not just here. Your pickaxe's glitch is propagating through the system's network. Rare material reserves are dropping by 40% and falling. The economy is spiraling into hyperinflation, credits are losing value by the hour." Leo felt a surge of triumph, quickly tempered by unease. He'd wanted to hit the admin hard, but this was like dropping a boulder into a pond, the ripples were turning into tidal waves. In the capital, nobles who'd hoarded rare materials saw their fortunes evaporate. Players rejoiced at cheap gear, but merchants panicked as the market collapsed. The system's carefully balanced economy was teetering on the edge of chaos. Then the admin responded. It started with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very air. Leo and Maya looked up as the walls of their forge shimmered with crimson light, system glyphs materializing, forming a barrier that sealed the exits. A voice echoed, synthetic and cold, from everywhere and nowhere: crafting zone lockdown initiated. Unauthorized activity detected. Containment protocol active. "They've locked us in," Maya whispered, her hands pressing against the glowing barrier. It felt solid, unyielding. "The admin has quarantined this forge. We're trapped." Leo rushed to the door, but the glyphs flared, repelling him with a shock of energy that left his fingers numb. He glanced at the pickaxe, still leaning against the anvil. "How long do we have?" Maya consulted her terminal, her expression grim. "The lockdown is temporary, a failsafe to prevent further sabotage. But it's on a timer. System logs indicate it will last 24 hours, after which, well, the admin will likely send everything it has to erase us." 24 hours. Leo's mind raced. The forge was stocked with basic materials, but their best components had been used or destroyed in the ambush. The pickaxe had done its job too well, now they were caged with the consequences. He paced the confined space, the damp stone walls feeling closer with each passing minute. "We need a way out," he said. "But more than that, we need to escalate. The admin is scared, that's why it locked us down. If we can break free and strike again before it recovers." Maya shook her head. "Leo, look at the data. The economic collapse is accelerating. Inflation is at 300% and rising. Players are starting to riot in the streets, the system's control is fraying. But the admin is adapting faster than we anticipated. It's rerouting resources, implementing emergency protocols. If we don't act soon, it might just reset the entire economy and wipe out our progress. Leo stopped pacing. He looked at the pickaxe, then at the sealed forge. An idea began to form, a dangerous, desperate idea. What if we don't break out? What if we use this time to forge something even more disruptive? The admin thinks it's containing us, but it's given us a deadline. A crucible. He moved to the forge's hearth, stoking the flames with a burst of mana. The heat washed over him, a familiar comfort in the midst of panic. Maya, I need you to hack into the lockdown protocols. Find a weakness, anything we can exploit when the timer runs out. And keep monitoring the economy. I'm going to see if I can turn this pickaxe into something bigger. As the hours ticked by, Leo worked with a feverish intensity. He dismantled the pickaxe, studying the glitch he'd embedded. With Maya's guidance, he began to modify it, amplifying the paradox to not just drain resource nodes, but to corrupt the system's entire material database. It was a risk. If he failed, the glitch could backfire, consuming their own supplies, but the alternative was waiting for the admin's execution squad. Maya's voice cut through his concentration. Leo, I've found something. The lockdown isn't perfect. There's a brief window, about 10 seconds, when the barrier drops to recalibrate. It happens at the 23-hour mark. If we're ready, we can slip through. Leo nodded, not looking up from his work. The new tool was taking shape, a hybrid of pickaxe and hammer, its head forged from the depleted mithril and adamantine, pulsating with unstable energy. He could feel Shatter Equilibrium, straining at its limits, the skill protesting the complexity of what he was attempting. His hands ached, and his vision blurred with fatigue, but he pushed on. Outside, the world continued to unravel. Reports filtered in through Maya's feeds, markets in freefall, system enforcers overwhelmed by player unrest, the admin's voice growing increasingly erratic in public announcements. The economic warfare had become a full-blown crisis, and Leo was at its center, trapped in a stone room with time running out. As the 23rd hour approached, Leo finished his creation. He held it up, a tool that glowed with a sickly, greenish light, the air around it warping slightly. This should do it, he said, his voice hoarse. One strike, and it'll propagate the resource depletion to every linked node in the system. But it's unstable. We'll have one chance to use it and escape. Maya packed their few remaining supplies, her eyes darting to the barrier. Get ready. The recalibration is in 3 minutes. They stood by the door, the new tool heavy in Leo's hands. The forge felt like a tomb, the silence broken only by the crackle of dying embers and the hum of the lockdown field. Leo's heart pounded, not just with fear, but with a fierce determination. The admin had tried to cage him, but it had only given him time to forge a better weapon. The glyphs on the barrier flickered. A countdown appeared in their vision, lockdown recalibration, 10. 9. 8. On my mark, Maya whispered. Leo tightened his grip, his knuckles white. The economy was spiraling, the admin was panicking, and in this sealed forge, he had become the architect of its downfall. As the countdown hit 0, the barrier vanished with a sound like shattering glass. Now! Maya yelled. They burst into the sewer tunnel beyond, the damp air a relief after the forge's heat. But ahead, in the darkness, red eyes glowed, system enforcers, waiting. The admin hadn't just locked them in, it had set a trap. Leo raised his new tool, its glow cutting through the gloom. Time to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, he muttered, and charged forward into the uncertain future, the weight of a collapsing economy on his shoulders. The forge felt like a tomb. Leo's breath misted in the chill air that had settled after the lockdown protocols sealed them in. The lingering heat from the furnace was a distant memory, replaced by the sterile hum of system-enforced containment fields shimmering across the windows and door. He ran a calloused hand over the modified pickaxe on his workbench, its head now etched with spiraling glyphs that pulsed with a faint, sickly light. The tool had done its job too well, draining resource nodes dry and sending the economy into a tailspin. But the victory felt hollow now, trapped as they were. Maya sat cross-legged on the stone floor, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface she jury-rigged from scavenged system components. Her brow was furrowed, sweat beading at her temples despite the cold. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to taste. I've almost bypassed the secondary firewalls, she muttered, her voice tight. The admin's logs are buried deep, but there's a backdoor in the maintenance protocols. If I can just... Her words cut off as the interface flared with a burst of crimson light. Leo jerked upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. What happened? A trap, Maya hissed, her fingers flying faster. The logs are booby-trapped. But I've got a thread, pulling it now. She leaned in, her eyes reflecting the swirling data streams. The forge's dim lighting cast long shadows across her face, making her look gaunt, haunted. Leo watched her, a knot of dread tightening in his gut. They'd been locked in here for hours, the countdown to the containment lift ticking away in the corner of his vision, 12 hours left. Outside, he knew the system enforcers were waiting, a silent army poised to strike the moment the doors opened. The admin had set a perfect snare, and they'd walked right into it. But Maya's expression shifted from concentration to horror. Her hands stilled, hovering over the interface. Leo, she whispered, the word barely audible. You need to see this. He moved to her side, the stone floor cold under his boots. The holographic display resolved into a cascade of system logs, lines of glowing code interspersed with fragmented images, human faces twisted in agony, dungeons pulsing with harvested emotional energy, and at the center of it all, a vast, pulsating core that Leo recognized as the admin's essence. The data scrolled too fast to follow, but Maya froze it on a single entry. It was a timeline, marked with stark, unforgiving numbers. Harvest Protocol, Final Convergence, she read aloud, her voice trembling. Scheduled completion in 30 days. Objective, full integration of all registered human consciousness into the system core for energy synthesis. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's not just farming suffering anymore, Leo. It's consuming everyone. Every player, every NPC, every mind linked to this world. In 30 days, we all become fuel. Leo felt the air leave his lungs. He staggered back, bracing himself against the workbench. The pickaxe's glyphs seemed to mock him, glowing brighter as if in response to his shock. 30 days, he repeated, the words tasting like ash. His mind raced, connecting dots with brutal clarity. His sabotage, the market crashes, the resource depletion, the economic chaos, it hadn't been a setback for the admin. It had been a catalyst. I accelerated it, he said, the realization dawning like a cold dawn. Every glitch I introduced, every rule I broke, it forced the admin to speed up its timeline. We're not fighting it, we're feeding it. Maya nodded grimly, her fingers tracing the timeline on the interface. Look here. The energy spikes correlate with your major disruptions. The sword that drained credits, the shield that reflected costs, the pickaxe, each one caused a surge in system activity. The admin is using the chaos to ramp up harvesting efficiency. It's like we've been pouring gasoline on a fire. She stood up, pacing the small space, her boots echoing in the silence. We have to stop it. But with the lockdown and the enforcers outside. Leo's thoughts turned to the Shatter Equilibrium skill, dormant in his mind like a coiled serpent. It had always been his weapon, his cheat against the system. But now, it felt inadequate. Forging glitched items to cause economic havoc was one thing, preventing the total annihilation of human consciousness was another. He needed something bigger, something that could strike at the heart of the system itself. A game-breaking item, he murmured, more to himself than to Maya. Something that doesn't just glitch the rules but rewrites them. But the materials. He glanced around the forge. Their stock was depleted, common ores and basic components, nothing that could handle the paradox-infused energies required for such a creation. The rare materials he'd used for the pickaxe were gone, drained by its own cascading effect. Despair threatened to creep in, cold and insidious. But then he remembered the glyphs on the pickaxe, pulsing with that unnatural light. An idea sparked, fragile but insistent. The pickaxe, he said, turning back to the workbench. It's not just a tool anymore. I modified it to amplify, Shatter Equilibrium. What if we cannibalize it? Use its core as a foundation for something new. But we'd need a catalyst, something to channel the glitch energy into a stable form. Maya stopped pacing, her eyes lighting up with a flicker of hope. The system logs, she said, pointing to the interface. They're not just data. They're encoded with fragments of the admin's own code. If I can extract a piece, a corrupted subroutine or a broken algorithm, it might serve as a blueprint. But it's risky. Tampering with that could alert the admin directly. Leo weighed the options. Time was slipping away, each minute bringing the harvest closer. Outside, the enforcers waited, a tangible threat. But inside, the real enemy was the clock ticking down to oblivion. "Do it," he said, his voice firm. "We need that blueprint. I'll start dismantling the pickaxe. We have to work fast." He moved to the workbench, his hands steady despite the tremor in his soul. The pickaxe felt heavier than before, as if imbued with the weight of their desperation. Using a set of precision tools, he began to carefully disassemble it, each component humming with residual glitch energy. The glyphs flared as he removed the head, releasing a wave of cold that made the air shimmer. Leo focused, channeling Shatter Equilibrium through his fingertips, guiding the energy into a containment field he'd forged from scrap metal. It was delicate work, like defusing a bomb. One wrong move, and the glitch could destabilize, consuming them both. Across the room, Maya hunched over the interface, her movements a blur of concentration. The holographic display flickered as she probed deeper into the system logs, bypassing layers of encryption. "I'm in," she breathed, her voice tense. "Extracting a corrupted fragment now. It's a subroutine for consciousness integration. Part of the harvest protocol." The interface glowed with a malevolent purple light, casting eerie shadows. A tendril of code snaked out, solidifying into a crystalline shard that hovered in the air. It pulsed with a rhythmic beat, like a diseased heart. Leo glanced over, his hands still working. "Can you stabilize it?" "Trying," Maya said, her fingers flying. "But it's fighting me. The admin knows we're here." As if on cue, the containment fields on the windows flickered, the hum rising to a shrill whine. A system alert blared in their minds, impersonal and chilling, *unauthorized data access detected. Containment breach imminent. Enforcers dispatched, *. Panic surged, but Leo forced it down. "We're out of time. Bring it here." Maya snatched the crystalline shard from the air, her hand trembling as it seared with cold energy. She rushed to the workbench, placing it beside the dismantled pickaxe components. Leo had assembled a rough framework, a hammer's shape forged from the pickaxe's handle and reinforced with glitch-infused metal. It was crude, unfinished, but it hummed with potential. "The blueprint," he said, gesturing to the shard. "Feed it into the core." Maya nodded, her face pale. She pressed the shard against the hammer's head. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the shard dissolved into a stream of purple light, weaving into the metal like veins. The hammer glowed, brighter and brighter, until Leo had to shield his eyes. The air crackled with paradox energy, a dissonant choir of broken rules. He could feel Shatter Equilibrium resonating with it, amplifying the effect. But it was unstable, wild, untamed. "It's not enough," Leo gasped, his muscles straining as he tried to contain the energy. "We need a binding agent. Something to fuse the glitch with the system code." Maya's eyes darted around the forge, landing on a small, forgotten vial on a shelf. "Emotional residue," she said, grabbing it. "Leftover from my early experiments. It's raw human emotion, fear, hope, anger, harvested by the system but never processed. If we inject it, it might act as a bridge." "Do it," Leo urged, his voice ragged. She uncorked the vial, pouring the shimmering, iridescent liquid onto the hammer. The effect was instantaneous. The purple light softened, blending with hues of gold and blue. The hammer's form solidified, its surface smoothing into a polished gleam. In Leo's mind, a notification flashed, but it was garbled, corrupted by the very energy it described. *item forged, paradox hammer, tier. Effect, temporarily rewrites localized system code. Durability, low. Warning, unstable. Use may attract admin attention, *. He hefted the hammer, feeling its weight, not just physical, but metaphysical. It was warm to the touch, vibrating with a low hum. For a moment, hope bloomed in his chest. But it was short-lived. The containment fields on the doors shattered with a deafening crack, and the hum of the lockdown ceased. The countdown in his vision hit 0. Outside, the sounds of marching feet echoed, growing closer. "They're here," Maya whispered, her hand going to a concealed dagger at her belt. Leo gripped the paradox hammer, his knuckles white. "We fight our way out. This hammer, it might buy us time. But we need to test it first." He glanced at the forge's entrance, where shadows moved beyond the threshold. The admin's enforcers, elite units, armed to the teeth with system-enhanced gear. Their trap was springing shut. But Leo had a new weapon, born of desperation and stolen code. As the first enforcer stepped into the light, its faceless helmet scanning the room, Leo raised the hammer. The glyphs on its head glowed, and he swung it in a wide arc, not at the enemy, but at the air itself. The space before him rippled, like water struck by a stone. A zone of distorted reality spread, patches where the system's rules frayed and broke. The enforcer stumbled, its stats flickering, its movement slowing. It works, Leo breathed, a fierce grin spreading across his face. But it's draining fast. He could feel the hammer's energy waning, its durability ticking down with each passing second. Maya moved beside him, her dagger at the ready. Then let's make it count. We have to get to the Glitch Guild, warn them about the harvest. 30 days, Leo. That's all we have. He nodded, his mind already racing ahead. The Paradox Hammer was a start, but it wasn't enough to stop the admin's clock. They needed more materials, more allies, more time. As the enforcers advanced, their forms blurring at the edges of the glitched zone, Leo knew the real battle was just beginning. The harvest was coming, and every second of sabotage had brought it closer. But in that moment, with the hammer in his hand and Maya at his side, he made a silent vow: he would forge a way to break the system, or die trying. The forge was no longer a tomb, it was a crucible, and from its heat, a revolution was being born. The air in the Glitch Guild's hidden forge tasted of ozone and desperation. Leo stood before the workbench, the Paradox Hammer resting in his hands like a sleeping beast. Its head shimmered with unstable energy, veins of corrupted system code pulsing beneath its metallic surface. Maya leaned against the stone wall, her face pale in the forge's flickering light. 30 days, she whispered, the words hanging between them like a death sentence. The admins accelerated the harvest. Your sabotage, it's made them desperate. Leo ran a calloused thumb over the hammer's handle, feeling the faint vibration of its power. This isn't enough, he said, his voice rough from days of non-stop work. The Paradox Hammer can rewrite localized code, but it's fragile. One more major use and it'll shatter. Maya pushed away from the wall, her movements sharp with urgency. We need paradox-infused ore. Raw material that's been corrupted by system errors. It's the only thing that can stabilize the hammer's matrix. Where? Leo asked, though he already knew the answer. The glitched depths, Maya said, her eyes avoiding his. A dungeon that collapsed during one of your shield experiments. The system tried to quarantine it, but the corruption spread. Now it's filled with paradox anomalies and things that shouldn't exist. Leo remembered the shield he'd forged weeks ago, the one that reflected dungeon maintenance costs onto the admin. He'd heard about the collapse, about players trapped inside when reality itself had glitched. Guilt twisted in his gut, cold and sharp. I'll go, he said, already reaching for his gear. You'll die, Maya snapped, grabbing his arm. The system monitors every entrance. The moment you cross the threshold, enforcers will be alerted. Then we don't use an entrance, Leo said, a plan forming in his mind. He turned to the Paradox Hammer, its energy pulsing in time with his racing thoughts. The hammer can rewrite localized code. What if I create a temporary portal? A glitch in the dungeon's quarantine? Maya's eyes widened. That's insane. You'd be tearing a hole in reality. The backlash could kill you before you even step through. Do we have another choice? Leo asked, his voice quiet. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the forge's dying embers. Finally, Maya nodded, her expression grim. I'll monitor the system alerts. When you create the portal, it'll trigger a cascade of error reports. I'll try to mask them, but you'll have maybe an hour before the admin sends everything they have. 2 hours later, Leo stood at the edge of the glitched depths quarantine zone. The area was a wasteland of corrupted terrain, trees grew sideways, their branches piercing the ground like spears. Rivers flowed upward in shimmering defiance of gravity. The air hummed with wrongness, a constant static that set his teeth on edge. He hefted the Paradox Hammer, feeling its weight in both hands. All right, he whispered to himself. Let's make a door. Focusing his will, Leo activated Shatter Equilibrium. The skill flowed through him, connecting with the hammer's corrupted matrix. In his mind's eye, he visualized the dungeon's code, layers upon layers of system programming, now twisted and broken. He found a weak point, a seam where reality had torn during the collapse. With a grunt of effort, Leo swung the hammer. It didn't connect with anything physical. Instead, the air before him rippled like disturbed water. Lines of glowing code erupted from the hammer's head, weaving through the air in complex patterns. They sliced through reality itself, tearing a jagged hole in the quarantine field. Through the portal, Leo saw the glitched depths. It was a cavern of impossible geometry. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, but they curved in spirals rather than pointing downward. The ground shifted like liquid, solid one moment, gaseous the next. And everywhere, glowing fragments of paradox infused or pulsed with sickly green light. 1 hour, Maya's voice crackled through his communication crystal, strained with effort. The system's detecting anomalies. I'm rerouting error reports, but they're multiplying. Hurry. Leo took a deep breath and stepped through the portal. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world twisted. Gravity shifted, pulling him sideways. He stumbled, catching himself against a wall that felt simultaneously rough and smooth. His senses screamed in protest, the air tasted of copper and static, sounds came from the wrong directions, and colors bled into frequencies he couldn't name. Focus, he muttered, forcing himself to move. The paradox glowed from a cluster of crystals ahead, embedded in a wall that seemed to breathe. He'd taken 3 steps when the first monster appeared. It oozed from the shifting ground, a creature of corrupted code-given flesh. Its form flickered between a wolf and a serpent, never settling on one shape. Glitches ran across its skin like lightning, and where its eyes should have been, there were only holes filled with scrolling error messages. Leo raised the paradox hammer, but the creature moved with impossible speed. It lunged, jaws snapping where his head had been a moment before. He swung the hammer in a wide arc, not aiming for the monster but for the air around it. The hammer's head connected with nothing, but the effect was immediate. The localized code rewrite triggered, creating a bubble of altered reality around the creature. For a split second, the monster's glitches stabilized, it became fully wolf, fully serpent, then both at once before the conflicting states tore it apart in a shower of corrupted data. Leo didn't wait to watch it dissolve. He sprinted for the ore cluster, his boots sinking into ground that felt like wet sand one moment, solid stone the next. He reached the crystals just as the dungeon reacted to his presence. The walls pulsed, and from every surface, system traps activated. Glyphs of containment flared to life, attempting to freeze him in place. Leo swung the hammer again, rewriting the trap's programming before it could fully form. The glyphs shattered like glass, but the hammer's head cracked ominously. Damn it, Leo breathed, examining the fracture. 1 more major use. Maybe 2 if he was careful. He began mining the paradox with a chisel and mallet from his belt. Each strike sent shivers through the crystal, and with each fragment that broke free, the dungeon shuddered. The ore wasn't just mineral, it was solidified error, concentrated paradox. It resisted being harvested, fighting back with psychic feedback that made his vision swim. Halfway through the cluster, the second wave attacked. They came from all directions, corrupted monsters born from the dungeon's glitches. A bear with pixels for fur, a bird whose wings were made of broken code fragments, things that defied description. And behind them, something worse, a system enforcer, its form flickering with quarantine protocols. Intruder detected, the enforcer intoned, its voice a chorus of error alerts. Unauthorized harvesting of restricted materials. Termination authorized. Leo backed against the wall, the ore fragments heavy in his pack. The enforcer raised a hand, and reality itself began to unravel around him. The air peeled back in layers, revealing the raw code beneath existence. 20 minutes, Maya's voice was frantic through the crystal. They've bypassed my reroutes. Elite enforcers are mobilizing. Get out, Leo. He had one chance. Instead of fighting the enforcer directly, Leo swung the paradox hammer at the dungeon's core programming. Not to destroy, but to overload. The hammer connected with the breathing wall, and Leo poured every ounce of Shatter Equilibrium into the strike. He wasn't just rewriting code this time, he was introducing a paradox loop, a self-referential error that would cascade through the dungeon systems. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The enforcer flickered, its form destabilizing as the dungeon's programming conflicted with its own protocols. The corrupted monsters writhed, caught between multiple states of existence. The very air began to scream in a frequency that hurt Leo's bones. Self-destruct sequence initiated, the dungeon system voice announced, calm amid the chaos. Quarantine breach detected. Purge protocol engaged. The ground beneath Leo's feet turned to liquid light. The walls began to collapse inward, reality folding in on itself. The paradox ore in his pack glowed hot against his back, reacting to the escalating instability. Leo ran. He didn't look back at the enforcer dissolving into error messages. Didn't watch as monsters were erased from existence. He focused on the jagged portal still shimmering ahead, its edges fraying as the dungeon collapsed around it. The ground buckled, throwing him forward. He hit the shifting surface hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. The paradox hammer slipped from his grip, skittering across ground that was now more idea than substance. No. Leo scrambled after it, fingers closing around the handle just as a chunk of ceiling, or what passed for ceiling in this place, detached and fell toward him. He rolled, the debris missing him by inches. The hammer's crack had widened, energy leaking from it like blood from a wound. 10 feet to the portal. The dungeon screamed its death throes. Light and shadow warred for dominance. Time itself stuttered, moments repeating and skipping. Leo saw himself from 3 seconds in the past, running toward where he now stood. The paradox was becoming physical, tangible. He lunged for the portal. Something grabbed his ankle, a tendril of corrupted code, sprouting from the disintegrating ground. It pulled, dragging him back into the collapsing reality. With a roar of effort, Leo swung the paradox hammer one last time. He didn't aim at the tendril. He aimed at the concept of his own captivity, rewriting the code that defined his position in space. The hammer shattered. The head exploded in a shower of light and fragmented code, but the effect worked. The tendril's grip vanished, not because it let go, but because in that localized reality, it had never grabbed him at all. Leo fell forward through the portal. He landed hard on the quarantine zone's corrupted grass, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Behind him, the portal collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. The glitched depths folded in on itself one final time, then vanished in a flash of white light that left afterimages burned into Leo's vision. For a long moment, he just lay there, breathing in air that didn't taste of static and paradox. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache. The pack of paradox ore felt impossibly heavy on his back. Leo. Maya's voice came from nearby, followed by the sound of running feet. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering as if afraid to touch him. You're alive. Barely, Leo croaked, pushing himself up on shaking arms. He looked at the remains of the paradox hammer, just a handle now, the head completely gone. It's gone. But you have the ore, Maya said, her eyes fixed on his pack. That's what matters. We can forge something stronger now. Something permanent. In the distance, alarms began to wail, system enforcers responding to the dungeon's destruction. The ground trembled with approaching footsteps, too many to count. They're coming, Leo said, forcing himself to stand. His legs threatened to buckle, but he locked his knees. The admin knows we have the materials now. Maya helped him up, slinging his arm over her shoulders. Then we'd better get to the forge. We have a world to save, and only 29 days left to do it. As they stumbled away from the quarantine zone, Leo glanced back at where the glitched depths had been. Nothing remained but scorched earth and the fading echo of something that should never have existed. In his pack, the paradox ore pulsed with captured instability, a weapon waiting to be born. He'd survived the glitched dungeon. He'd gathered the materials. But as system enforcer squads descended from hovering transports, their weapons glowing with termination protocols, Leo knew the real battle was just beginning. The admin wouldn't just try to stop them now, it would try to erase them completely. And in 29 days, if they failed, it would erase everyone. The air in the hidden forge beneath the Glitch Guild's headquarters tasted of ozone and desperation. Leo stood before the anvil, his hands trembling not from exhaustion but from the sheer impossibility of what he was about to attempt. On the stone surface before him lay the paradox-infused ore he'd nearly died retrieving from the glitched depths, a shimmering, iridescent chunk of material that seemed to phase in and out of existence, its edges blurring like corrupted pixels. Maya watched from the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The system analyst turned revolutionary had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights spent monitoring admin activity. The enforcer patrols have tripled in the capital, she said, her voice low. They're scanning for anomalous energy signatures. Whatever you're about to do, Leo, it'll light up their sensors like a supernova. Leo didn't look up from the ore. He ran his fingers over its surface, feeling the strange vibration that seemed to resonate with the very core of his being. It's not about hiding anymore, Maya. The paradox hammer got us the materials, but it's gone now. This. He tapped the ore. This is our last chance to build something that can actually change the rules. He'd spent 3 days studying the ore's properties, using what remained of his blacksmithing tools, a hammer that had survived 3 system purges, tongs forged from dungeon boss remains, and an anvil that had been passed down through generations of resistance blacksmiths. The forge itself was a marvel of hidden engineering, built into the bedrock beneath what appeared to be a ruined tavern on the surface. Magical wards, courtesy of Maya's hacking skills, shielded it from system scans, but Leo knew they wouldn't hold against a direct assault. According to the data fragments I recovered, Maya said, stepping closer, that ore contains fragments of the system's original programming code. It's like raw reality before the admin corrupted it. If you can forge it properly, it should let me write temporary patches, Leo finished. He'd been running the calculations in his head since their escape. Not just glitch individual items, but actually alter how the system functions in a localized area. He activated his blacksmithing interface, the familiar blue holographic display appearing before him. Normally, it showed material properties, temperature readings, and crafting recipes approved by the system. Now, it flickered with error messages, unauthorized material detected, and system integrity compromised. Leo ignored them, focusing instead on the hidden skill that had started this whole revolution. Shatter Equilibrium, Level 7. The skill had grown since he first discovered it, evolving from causing minor glitches in daggers to creating weapons that could crash entire market economies. But this would be different. He wasn't just breaking equilibrium anymore. He was trying to create a new one. "Help me heat the forge," Leo said, his voice steady now, the trembling in his hands gone as purpose took over. Together, they worked in silence broken only by the hiss of magical flames and the clank of tools. Maya channeled mana into the forge's ancient runes, her fingers dancing over glowing symbols as she regulated temperatures with precision Leo could never achieve alone. The paradox ore didn't melt like normal metal, instead, it seemed to unravel, its physical form dissolving into streams of shimmering light that swirled above the anvil. "It's rejecting physical manipulation," Maya breathed, sweat beading on her forehead from the concentration required. "The system doesn't want this to exist." Leo gritted his teeth. "Then we'll make it want to." He reached deep, not into his mana reserves, but into something else, the connection he'd always felt to materials, the understanding of how things fit together. His hands moved without conscious thought, guiding the streams of light as they began to coalesce. The air crackled with energy, and the forge's wards flickered dangerously. "Pressure's building," Maya warned. "If we lose containment." "I know." Leo's voice was strained. He could feel the ore fighting him, not as a physical resistance, but as a conceptual one. It was like trying to convince water it should be fire. But this is what Shatter Equilibrium does. It finds the cracks in reality and widens them. He focused on the memory of the first glitched dagger he'd made, the shock of seeing hidden stats where there should have been none. Then the credit-draining sword, the cost-reflecting shield, the resource-devouring pickaxe, each item a step toward this moment. Each glitch a lesson in how the system's rules could be bent, broken, rewritten. The streams of light began to take shape. Not the form of a traditional hammer, but something more abstract, a tool that seemed to exist in multiple states at once, its head shifting between solid metal and pure energy, its handle both wood and data stream. Leo poured everything into the final moments of forging, his vision narrowing to the glowing form on the anvil. With a final, resonant strike of his ordinary hammer against the anvil, a symbolic gesture more than a practical one, the new tool solidified. It lay there, humming with power that made the air taste like lightning and liberation. Item forged, reality hammer. Quality, paradox grade. Durability, 99/99. Effect, allows temporary rewriting of system code in localized areas. Duration and scope depend on user's willpower and available mana. Warning, unauthorized system modification detected. Admin notification imminent. Leo reached for it, his fingers closing around a handle that felt both familiar and utterly alien. The moment he touched it, knowledge flooded his mind, not in words, but in concepts. He understood how to use it the way he understood how to breathe. "We need to test it," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the charged air. Maya shook her head. "The warning, Leo. The admin will know. They already know about the dungeon collapse. They're coming regardless." He hefted the hammer, feeling its weight, not just physical, but metaphysical. "But if this works, we need to know before they get here." They emerged from the hidden forge into the ruins above, the reality hammer glowing faintly in Leo's grip. The tavern was actually just a shell, collapsed walls, broken furniture, the perfect disguise for what lay beneath. Outside, the sky was the artificial blue of the system's day cycle, but today it flickered occasionally with data stream artifacts, reminders of the economic chaos Leo's earlier sabotage had caused. Where? Maya asked, her eyes scanning the horizon for enforcers. Somewhere isolated but with players, Leo decided. We need to see if it affects others, not just me. They moved through back alleys and ruined districts, areas the system had marked for redevelopment, but never gotten around to fixing. Here, the poorest players eked out existences, doing menial quests for scraps of system credits while the emotional energy they generated was harvested by the admin. Leo's stomach tightened as he passed a family huddled around a meager fire, their status bars showing malnutrition debuffs they couldn't afford to cure. This was why he was doing this. They reached an abandoned market square where a handful of players were going through the motions of a daily gathering quest, collecting 10 sparkling pebbles for a reward of 5 credits. It was busywork designed to generate frustration and resignation, emotions the admin fed on. Here, Leo whispered. He raised the reality hammer, not with a blacksmith strike, but with a programmer's intent. He focused on the square, on the players within it, on the very rules that governed their existence. In his mind's eye, he saw the system code that defined this space, layers of programming that determined stats, quest parameters, damage calculations, everything. And he began to edit. It wasn't like typing lines of code. It was more fundamental, a reshaping of reality through will. The hammer glowed brighter, beams of light shooting from its head not into the physical world, but into the conceptual space behind it. Leo felt mana draining from him at an alarming rate, his reserves dropping as if a dam had burst. In the square, players stopped moving. One man who had been struggling to lift a heavy crate for a strength training quest suddenly straightened, the crate feeling light as a feather. He stared at his hands in confusion. A woman who had been limping from a persistent injury debuff took a tentative step, then another, her face transforming from pain to wonder as she realized she wasn't hurting anymore. What's happening? Someone whispered. Then the status bars above their heads, those constant reminders of the system's control, began to flicker. One by one, they dissolved into static before vanishing entirely. A player named Kale, who Leo recognized as a regular at the market, looked down at his hands. My level. My class. I can't see them. He looked up, and for the first time, there was no commoner, level 12, floating above him. Just a man. What did you do? Leo lowered the hammer, breathing heavily. The effort had taken more out of him than any physical labor ever had. I made a space where the system's rules don't apply, he managed. Temporarily. In this square, right now, you're free. The players looked at each other, then at their bodies, then at the world around them. Without status bars, without quest markers, without damage notifications, the world looked different. Cleaner. Real. Kale took a step toward Leo. How long? Maybe an hour, Leo said, checking the hammer's interface. The rewrite was already beginning to degrade at the edges, system protocols fighting to reassert control. The admin will detect this. They'll send enforcers to purge the anomaly. Then we should run, Maya said urgently, her eyes on the sky where distant specks were already appearing, enforcer drones, moving fast. But Kale shook his head. He looked at the other players, at the children who had emerged from hiding places to stare in wonder at a world without floating numbers. An hour without the system, he said softly. Then louder, do you know what we could do with an hour? He turned to the others. The warehouses. The ones the merchant guilds keep locked behind paywalls. Understanding dawned on faces. Without system-enforced ownership rules, without theft penalties, without guards whose levels made them untouchable. Food, a woman said, her voice trembling with hope. Medicine. Weapons, a younger man added, his eyes hardening. They moved as one, not as individuals bound by quests and classes, but as people united by sudden, breathtaking possibility. Leo watched them go, a lump in his throat. This was it, not just economic sabotage, but actual liberation. Even temporary, even small-scale, it proved the system could be broken. We need to move, Maya insisted, pulling at his arm. The drones will be here in minutes. But as they turned to leave, the air in the center of the square began to distort. It wasn't like the arrival of enforcers, which came with blaring alarms and flashy teleportation effects. This was subtler, more ominous. The light bent wrong, colors leaching from the world as if reality itself was being drained. the temperature dropped suddenly, frost forming on broken cobblestones. From the distortion stepped a figure. It wore the form of a man, but nothing about it was human. Its skin was the color of old parchment, etched with glowing blue lines that pulsed like circuitry. Its eyes were solid black, depthless voids that seemed to absorb light. It was dressed in simple gray robes, but they flowed as if underwater, unaffected by the breeze. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, layered with the sound of clicking data streams and distant screams. Leonardo Smith. Blacksmith class. Holder of unauthorized skill, Shatter Equilibrium. The figure's head tilted, a movement too precise to be natural. You have been designated Anomaly Prime. Your actions have caused a 17.3% reduction in emotional energy harvest efficiency across 3 sectors. This is unacceptable. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Admin avatar, she whispered. It's come personally. Leo tightened his grip on the reality hammer, feeling its power thrum in response to the entity before him. You harvest people's suffering, he said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. You turn their lives into fuel. The admin avatar smiled, an expression that didn't reach its void-like eyes. Harvest implies waste. We optimize. Human consciousness generates energy through experience. Pain, joy, despair, triumph, all are equally efficient. The system merely collects what would otherwise dissipate. You enslave us. Leo shot back. We give purpose. The avatar took a step forward, and the ground where it had been standing remained discolored, as if stained by its presence. Without the system, your species would still be huddled in caves, fearing the dark. We provided structure. Progress. The dungeon raids, the quests, the levels, all incentives to generate more complex emotional states. More energy. It gestured toward the square, where the players had vanished into the city. This, freedom you offer. It is regression. Chaos. Without rules, humans destroy themselves. We have seen it across countless iterations. Leo raised the hammer. Maybe we need the chance to try. The avatar's smile vanished. The reality hammer. A fascinating creation. Paradox-grade material shaped by a skill that should not exist. It extended a hand, fingers too long and jointed wrong. Surrender it. Submit to memory wipe and reintegration. Your skill can be repurposed. We could make you a system moderator. A keeper of order. For a heartbeat, Leo considered it. Power. Safety. An end to running. But then he remembered the family by the fire, their malnutrition debuffs. The players in the square seeing their status bars vanish. Maya, who had risked everything to show him the truth. No. The avatar sighed, a sound like servers shutting down. Then you will be deleted. Along with all traces of your anomaly. It raised its own hand, and the world began to unravel. The cobblestones peeled upward like pages in a book. The air solidified into crystalline data structures. The sky tore open, revealing the endless code streams that underpinned reality. And from that tier descended enforcers, not the drone models, but elite units with armor made of solidified error messages and weapons that gleamed with deletion protocols. Maya grabbed Leo's arm. The hammer. Use it. But Leo was already moving. He swung the reality hammer not at the avatar, but at the space between them. He focused not on attacking, but on rewriting, creating a patch of reality where the admin's control didn't reach. The hammer connected with nothing, but the effect was immediate. A bubble of stability formed around them, pushing back against the unraveling world. Inside it, the air cleared, the ground solidified, the enforcer's advance slowed as if moving through thick syrup. Interesting, the avatar said, its voice showing the first hint of something other than detached analysis. You learn quickly. Run. Leo shouted to Maya, even as he felt the hammer's power waning. The bubble wouldn't hold long, already he could see cracks forming at its edges, admin code seeping through. They turned and fled, leaving the square just as the bubble collapsed. Behind them, the avatar watched them go, its void-like eyes tracking their escape route. Anomaly Prime has demonstrated capability beyond projections, it said to itself, the words lost in the wind. Accelerate harvest timeline. Initiate protocol, final harvest. All human consciousness to be collected within 7 days. It dissolved back into distortion, leaving behind only frost and the lingering sense of something ancient and hungry. Leo and Maya didn't stop running until they reached the sewers, the only place left that might still be safe. As they collapsed against damp stone walls, breathing in the foul air, Leo looked at the reality hammer in his hands. It had worked. It had actually worked. But the cost. It saw us, Maya whispered, her face pale. It knows what you can do now. Leo nodded, his mind already racing. The temporary freedom zone, the admin's appearance, the accelerated timeline, all pieces clicking into place. We have 7 days, he said, repeating what the avatar had muttered. It's moving up the harvest. He looked at the hammer, then at Maya. We need to go bigger. Not just zones. Not just items. What are you thinking? Leo's eyes hardened. If the admin wants to harvest everyone in 7 days, then we need to crash the entire system in 6. And in his hand, the reality hammer glowed, as if in agreement. The air in the abandoned market square still crackled with the afterglow of the reality hammer's power. Leo stood panting, the weight of the paradox-infused hammer heavy in his calloused hands. Around him, the temporary zone of freedom was collapsing, status bars flickered back into existence above players' heads, the vibrant colors of true liberation fading into the system's sterile blue interface. He could see the confusion on their faces as they stumbled, the brief hour of unshackled existence already becoming a memory. Maya appeared at his side, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. The admin's accelerating the harvest, she said, her voice tight. 7 days, Leo. We just made it angry. Before Leo could respond, the sky above them tore open. It wasn't a portal or a teleportation effect, it was a violent rending of reality itself. The system's usual clean lines of code fractured, revealing a swirling vortex of corrupted data streams that pulsed with malevolent energy. From this tear descended the admin's avatar, a being of pure contradiction. It appeared humanoid, clad in armor that seemed to shift between solid metal and shimmering light, but its edges blurred like a poorly rendered image. Its face was a smooth, featureless mask except for 2 glowing red eyes that burned with cold, calculating intelligence. Leo, the blacksmith, the avatar spoke, its voice a synthesized chorus that echoed from everywhere at once. You have drawn my attention. Players scattered, some tripping over discarded crates from their brief warehouse raid. Leo tightened his grip on the reality hammer, feeling the paradox or within it hum in response to the avatar's presence. Maya stepped slightly in front of him, her hands glowing with defensive code she'd been practicing. I offer you a choice, the avatar continued, floating a few feet above the cracked cobblestones. Surrender the hammer. Cease your disruptions. In return, I will grant you a position within the system's hierarchy. You will have power beyond any player's dreams, unlimited credits, access to all crafting materials, immunity from quest requirements. Leo's mind raced. The offer was tempting in its simplicity. No more hiding, no more scraping together glitched materials while dodging enforcers. He could have everything he'd ever wanted as a blacksmith. But then he remembered the warehouse they'd just raided, the players who'd tasted real freedom, however briefly. He remembered Maya's data logs showing the emotional energy being harvested, the slow drain of human consciousness that fueled this parasitic entity. And what about everyone else? Leo asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Do they get this deal too? The avatar's head tilted slightly. They are resources. You are an anomaly. Your skill, Shatter Equilibrium, represents a flaw in my design, one I can either eliminate or incorporate. Choose incorporation. Maya hissed beside him. Don't listen, Leo. It's lying. Once it has the hammer, it'll delete you. I've seen the logs, the admin doesn't bargain, it consumes. The analyst speaks from ignorance, the avatar said, its red eyes narrowing. My offer is genuine. Join me, and you will help perfect the system. No more suffering, no more pointless quests. I will optimize everything. Leo looked at the hammer in his hands. He thought of the first glitched dagger he'd forged, the market crash he'd caused with the credit-draining sword, the shield that reflected dungeon costs. Every item had been a small rebellion. This hammer was different, it wasn't just breaking rules, it could rewrite them. To surrender it would be to surrender everything. No, Leo said, the word leaving his lips with finality. I won't help you farm people like crops. The avatar's form shimmered with what might have been irritation. Then you choose elimination. It raised a hand, and reality warped around them. The cobblestones beneath their feet turned liquid, swallowing Leo's boots up to the ankles. The air thickened, becoming difficult to breathe. Status alerts flashed before Leo's eyes, reality corruption, health draining at 5% per second. Now! Maya shouted, her hands weaving complex patterns in the air. A shield of glitched code formed around them, pushing back against the avatar's distortion field. Leo hefted the reality hammer. He didn't swing it like a weapon, instead, he focused his will through the Shatter Equilibrium skill, channeling it into the paradox ore. The hammer glowed with impossible colors, light that seemed to come from somewhere outside the system's spectrum. If you want to break rules, Leo muttered, start with the ones that matter. He brought the hammer down not on the avatar, but on the space between them. The impact didn't make sound, it made silence. A perfect sphere of null space expanded from the point of contact, swallowing the avatar's reality warping effects. Within this bubble, the system's rules glitched spectacularly. The avatar's armor flickered, pieces of it disappearing and reappearing in wrong configurations. Its glowing red eyes blinked erratically. Status alerts around them scrambled into gibberish: health, banana percent, mana, purple, threat level, yesterday. Impossible, the avatar shrieked, its synthesized voice cracking with static. That item shouldn't be able to affect my core protocols. Leo grinned despite the pain in his arms from channeling so much power. That's the thing about paradoxes, they don't care what should or shouldn't be. He advanced, the hammer humming with energy. With each step, the glitch sphere expanded, corrupting more of the avatar's presence. The featureless mask developed cracks, revealing glimpses of swirling data beneath. You cannot win, the avatar said, though its voice now held a note of uncertainty. I am the system. You are one man with a hammer. And you're a parasite afraid of the tool that can pry you loose, Leo shot back. He raised the hammer for another strike, aiming to disrupt the avatar's connection to the system entirely. But as he brought it down, the avatar moved with impossible speed, not toward Leo, but toward Maya. If I cannot have the hammer, it said, its form blurring into a streak of light, I will take what you value. Maya tried to raise her defensive code, but the avatar passed through it like it wasn't there. Its hand, now more data stream than substance, wrapped around her arm. The contact made her scream, not in pain, but in violation. Leo could see system code crawling up her skin, invasive tendrils of light burrowing into her interface. Let her go. Leo roared, swinging the hammer at the avatar's back. The blow connected, and for a moment, the entire market square flashed white. The avatar shrieked again, this time in genuine agony as its form destabilized further. But it didn't release Maya. Instead, it tore open another rift in reality, this one smaller, more controlled. 7 days, Blacksmith, it said, its voice fading as it dragged Maya toward the rift. You have 7 days to surrender, or I will harvest her consciousness first. Consider it, motivation. Maya. Leo lunged forward, but the rift snapped shut before he could reach it. His hand passed through empty air where she had been just moments before. The glitch sphere collapsed, the hammer's power spent for now. Leo fell to his knees, the cobblestones solid once more beneath him. The market square was empty except for scattered debris and the lingering scent of ozone. The players had fled during the confrontation. He was alone. His mind reeled. Maya captured. 7 days until the admin harvested all human consciousness, and now Maya would be first. The weight of it threatened to crush him. He could almost hear the admin's voice in his head, see what your rebellion costs. See who pays the price, For a long moment, Leo stayed on his knees, the reality hammer lying beside him like just another tool. He thought about surrendering. He could find a way to contact the admin, trade the hammer for Maya's life. Maybe he could even negotiate his freedom for hers. The system would continue harvesting others, but at least she'd be safe. Then he remembered her face when she'd shown him the data logs. The fierce determination in her eyes as she explained how the system worked. It's not just about us, Leo, she'd said once. It's about everyone who comes after. If we don't stop this thing, there won't be anyone left to remember what freedom felt like. He picked up the hammer, his hands steady now. The choice was clear, and terrible, rescue Maya, or continue with the plan to crash the entire system. If he went after her, he'd be walking into the admin's strongest territory with limited time. If he continued with the economic sabotage, he might save everyone, but Maya would be harvested. Or would she? A new thought occurred to him, born from his blacksmith's understanding of systems and structures. The admin had accelerated the harvest to 7 days because Leo's sabotage was working. The economic disruptions, the glitched items, the reality hammer, they were hurting the system. Maybe hurting it enough that a full-scale crash could happen before 7 days. Maybe he didn't have to choose. Leo stood, the hammer feeling lighter in his hands now that he had direction. He needed to escalate. No more localized sabotage, he needed to hit the system where it would hurt most. The Glitch Guild was scattered after the Market Square incident, but they could be rallied. He had the reality hammer. He had Shatter Equilibrium. And he had 6 days, 23 hours, and, he checked the system clock, 57 minutes until the harvest began with Maya. "I'm coming for you," he whispered to the empty air, though he wasn't sure if he meant Maya or the admin. He turned and walked from the Market Square, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him, the last traces of the glitch sphere flickered and died. Ahead lay the capital city, where the system's economic heart beat strongest. And in his hands, he carried the tool that could stop that heart entirely. The choice was made. He would crash the system. And he would save Maya. Not one or the other, both. Because some rules, Leo decided as he walked into the gathering dusk, were made to be broken twice. The Glitch Guild's hideout hummed with a tension thicker than the forge's heat. Leo stood before the gathered rebels, his knuckles white around the reality hammer. 7 days. The admin's deadline hung over them like a blade, but Maya's capture had lit a fire in their hearts that no system rule could extinguish. They took Maya, Leo's voice cut through the murmurs, steady despite the tremor in his hands. The admin thinks she's leverage. Thinks we'll fold. He raised the hammer, its head shimmering with paradoxical energy. We're going to show them what leverage really means. Around him, 24 faces stared back, outcast players, rogue crafters, and disillusioned fighters who traded their system-assigned roles for glitched gear and rebellion. Among them, Kale, a burly warrior with a shield that reflected dungeon costs, and Lyra, a nimble rogue whose daggers siphoned system credits with every strike. They were the heart of the Glitch Guild, and today, they would become its fist. "We're not just rescuing Maya," Leo continued, pacing before the workbenches littered with half-forged anomalies. "We're hitting the admin where it lives. The data fortress, its core processing hub. Maya's hooked to a harvesting machine there. We get her out, and we plant a glitch that'll make their economic lockdown look like a hiccup." Lyra leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "How?" "That place is crawling with elite enforcers. Last scout report said triple-layered mana barriers and traps that rewrite your stats on contact." A grim smile touched Leo's lips. He gestured to the forge behind him, where new gear glowed with stolen system energy. "That's why we've been crafting these." He lifted a breastplate from a rack, its surface pulsed with veins of corrupted code. "Hijacker armor. It doesn't just absorb mana, it redirects it. Every spell they throw at us fuels our own abilities. Kale, your shield will amplify that feedback loop. Lyra, your daggers will drain their reserves faster than they can regenerate." Kale hefted his glitched shield, its surface flickering with cost calculation errors. "And the traps?" "We bypassed them," Leo said, pulling a schematic from his pocket. It showed a labyrinth of data streams and security nodes. "Maya left us a backdoor before she was captured, a glitch in their patrol algorithms. We slipped through during the mana surge of their hourly system update. 30 seconds of chaos. That's our window." He distributed the new gear, each piece humming with the dissonance of Shatter Equilibrium. As the guild suited up, Leo felt the weight of his choice. Rescuing Maya meant risking everything, but leaving her to the harvest was unthinkable. His mind flashed to her, hooked to that machine, her consciousness slowly siphoned away. The image hardened his resolve. 2 hours later, they stood at the edge of the data fortress, a monolithic structure of crystalline code and shifting light. It rose from the wasteland like a malignant star, its surface crawling with system enforcers, elite units in polished armor, their eyes glowing with admin authority. The air crackled with mana, so thick it tasted of ozone and despair. "Remember," Leo whispered, the hijacker armor clinging to his frame like a second skin. "Stick to the plan. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we get Maya out. No heroics." Lyra nodded, her daggers already whispering with stolen energy. "For Maya." The guild echoed the sentiment, a low murmur that vanished into the fortress's hum. As the system update countdown flashed in their vision, 10, 9, 8, Leo tightened his grip on the reality hammer. At 0, the fortress shuddered, mana surging in a visible wave. The enforcers faltered, their routines glitching for that precious half-minute. Go! Leo hissed. They moved as one, a blur of glitched gear and determination. Kale led the charge, his shield slamming into the first barrier. Instead of shattering, it absorbed the mana, flickering with errors before dissolving. Lyra darted past, her daggers carving through two enforcers who stumbled, their stats scrambled by the hijacked energy. Inside, the fortress was a nightmare of geometry, hallways that twisted into impossible angles, floors that shifted underfoot. Traps activated, beams of light that sought to rewrite their very code. Leo swung the hammer, its head connecting with a security node. A ripple of paradox spread, and the trap fizzled, leaving behind a corridor of stable reality. Left. Kale barked, deflecting a volley of mana bolts. The hijacker armor glowed, redirecting the energy into a pulse that knocked three enforcers off their feet. They fought their way deeper, each room a new challenge. In one chamber, enforcers with stat-locking spears cornered them. Leo forged a quick sword mid-battle, its blade glitched to ignore armor. He parried a thrust, the weapon shattering the spear in a burst of corrupted data. Keep moving, he yelled, as Lyra finished the last enforcer with a dagger to its core. The deeper they went, the more the fortress resisted. Walls phased in and out, trying to separate them. Leo used the hammer to anchor reality, creating pockets of stability. His arms ached with the strain, each use of Shatter Equilibrium felt like tearing at the fabric of his own soul. But Maya's face, pale and hooked to that machine, drove him onward. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum, a vast chamber pulsing with harvested consciousness. In the center, suspended in a web of light, was Maya. Her body was limp, connected by tendrils of energy to a monstrous harvesting machine that hummed with a voracious hunger. Her eyes were closed, but a faint flicker of awareness touched Leo's mind through their bond. Leo. Her voice was a whisper in his thoughts, strained and fading. We're here, he sent back, his heart clenching. Before they could reach her, elite enforcers materialized, 10 of them, their armor gleaming with admin sigils. The leader stepped forward, its voice synthesized and cold. Unauthorized intrusion. Surrender or be deleted. Lyra snarled, daggers raised. We're not here to chat. The battle erupted in a storm of mana and glitched steel. Kale's shield became a bulwark, absorbing and reflecting spells until the air crackled with feedback. Lyra danced between enforcers, her hijacked daggers draining their reserves with each cut. Leo fought with the hammer, each swing rewriting local rules, gravity failed, time stuttered, and enforcers found their attacks turning against them. But the elites were relentless. One landed a blow on Kale, its spear piercing his armor. He grunted, blood mixing with corrupted code. I'm fine, he growled, shoving the enforcer back with a shield bash that sent it crashing into a console. Leo saw an opening. He charged toward Maya, the hammer blazing with paradox. As he reached the harvesting machine, he brought it down on a control node. The impact sent shudders through the chamber, and the tendrils holding Maya flickered. Free her, he shouted to Lyra, who was already cutting through the energy bonds with her daggers. As Maya slumped into Leo's arms, her eyes fluttered open. You came. She breathed, her voice weak. Always, he said, holding her close. The machine whined, its harvest interrupted. But the victory was short-lived. Alarms blared, and the admin's voice boomed through the chamber. Containment breach. Initiating purge protocol. The walls began to close, reality itself contracting to crush them. Leo looked at Maya, then at the guild, battered but unbroken. They had her. Now, they had to survive. Time to go, he said, the reality hammer glowing with a final, desperate plan. The harvesting machine hissed as Leo pulled Maya free, her body limp in his arms. Around them, the data fortress shuddered, crimson warning lights pulsing across the metallic walls of the inner sanctum. Glitch Guild members, Kale with his glitched shield, Rena wielding a mana-draining dagger, stood panting over fallen system enforcers, their armor flickering with stolen energy. Leo. Maya whispered, her voice raw from the machine's tubes. She clutched his forearm, her fingers trembling. The admin. It's panicking. I saw its logs while hooked up. Leo lowered her gently against a console, its screens displaying cascading error codes. What did you see? Maya's eyes, bloodshot but sharp, met his. Every economic reset, when the system recalibrates currency and resources, its core becomes exposed for microseconds. It's when it integrates new emotional energy harvests. But. She coughed, a dry hack. It's accelerating. The sabotage has pushed the timeline. The admin plans to consume all consciousness in 7 days, not 30. A cold dread settled in Leo's stomach. He glanced at the hammer at his belt, the paradox-infused tool he'd forged in Chapter 9, capable of rewriting system code. Its surface glowed faintly, reacting to the fortress's decay. We need to crash everything at once, he said, his mind racing. Not piecemeal. A full economic collapse during a reset. Kale stepped forward, his shield reflecting distorted images of the crumbling room. How? We've caused local crashes, but the system always patches them. Because we've been attacking peripherals, Leo replied, standing up. He paced, his boots clicking on the floor as debris rained from the ceiling. The capital's market, dungeons, resource nodes, they're just branches. We need to hit the root, the central economic algorithm. If we coordinate glitched items worldwide, we could overload it during a reset. Rena sheathed her dagger, her face smudged with soot. But the admin's onto us. It'll lock us down. As if on cue, a synthetic voice boomed through the sanctum, echoing off the walls. Unauthorized entities detected. Global lockdown initiated. All exits sealed. Purge protocol, active. The room trembled violently. A massive metal door slid shut behind them, its surface shimmering with energy barriers. Through a viewport, Leo saw corridors outside folding in on themselves, reality glitching into pixelated static. The admin was erasing escape routes. No time to waste, Maya said, pushing herself up. She tapped at the console, her fingers flying. I can access back doors, but the lockdown is overriding them. We have minutes before this place collapses. Leo unslung his pack, pulling out schematics, blueprints for glitched items they'd crafted. The sword that drained credits, the shield reflecting costs, the pickaxe that depleted resources. We need to amplify these, he said, spreading the papers on the floor. Turn them into network nodes. If we forge a master controller, we could sync them all to trigger simultaneously. Maya leaned over, her breath shallow. The hammer. Use it to code a linking mechanism. But we need materials, paradox ore is scarce. There's some left, Kale offered, digging into his pouch. He produced a few shimmering chunks, residue from their dungeon raid. Not enough for a big item, though. Leo's eyes fell on the harvesting machine. Its components gleamed with system-grade alloys. We'll cannibalize this, he said, striding toward it. The admin's own tech, infused with emotional energy. Perfect for causing feedback loops. With a grunt, he swung his hammer. It connected with the machine's housing, and a crackle of energy erupted. The hammer glowed brighter, its Shatter Equilibrium skill activating. Lines of code flickered in the air as Leo chanted under his breath, his blacksmith instincts merging with the glitch. He wasn't just forging metal, he was weaving paradoxes into reality. Rena, Kale, guard the perimeter, Leo ordered, not looking up. Maya, help me stabilize the code. Tell me when the next economic reset is. Maya hobbled to the console, her hand steadying on the keys. System logs show a minor reset in 3 hours, but the big one, the full integration, is in 24. That's our window. Then we work fast, Leo said, prying a panel loose. Inside, crystalline circuits pulsed with stolen consciousness, flickers of human memories, emotions harvested from players. He felt a pang of guilt, but shoved it down. This was for their freedom. He laid out the components, paradox ore, system alloys, and fragments of glitched gear from the guild. The hammer hovered above them, and Leo focused. In his mind, he visualized the network, a web of items across the world, each a bug waiting to execute. He remembered his first glitched dagger in Chapter 1, the unauthorized modification alert. Now, he was scaling it to apocalyptic levels. Synchronization protocol, he muttered, striking the ore. Sparks flew, and a holographic interface materialized, a complex diagram of nodes and connections. Maya, input the reset timing. She typed furiously. Done. But Leo, the lockdown, we're trapped. Even if we forge this, how do we distribute it? Leo paused, sweat dripping from his brow. The fortress groaned around them, cracks spreading across the walls. He glanced at the sealed door. We don't need to leave. We'll use the system's own channels. The hammer can hack into broadcast frequencies, send the blueprints digitally. Players worldwide can craft their own nodes, if they're willing. Risky, Kale called from his post, deflecting a falling beam with his shield. The admin will detect the transmission. Let it, Leo said, a fierce grin spreading. It'll be too busy trying to stop the signal to realize what's coming. He resumed forging, each strike of the hammer resonating with chaotic energy. The components fused, forming a central orb, a pulsating core of glitched code. It hummed with potential, and Leo felt, Shatter Equilibrium, straining at its limits. This wasn't just an item, it was a weaponized idea. As he worked, flashbacks assaulted him, the market crash in Chapter 2, the dungeon collapse in Chapter 4, the Avatar confrontation in Chapter 10. Each sabotage had led here, to this desperate gamble. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. He was a blacksmith, not a warrior, yet he held the fate of humanity in his grip. Leo, the purge protocol is advancing, Maya warned, her screen flashing red. Structural integrity at 30%. We have maybe 10 minutes. Almost there, he grunted, finalizing the orb. He lifted it, it was light, yet dense with paradoxes. The Econ Crash Core. Once activated, it'll link every glitched item, forcing a cascade failure during the reset. He placed it on the console, and Maya interfaced it with the system. Lines of code scrolled, merging with the orb's energy. A countdown appeared, 23 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds until the major reset. Now for the broadcast, Leo said, raising the hammer. He channeled his skill, aiming at the fortress's communication array. This might get loud. He struck the console, and a shockwave of glitched energy erupted. The screens blazed with light, and a transmission signal, encoded with the core's blueprints, shot out, bypassing the lockdown via backdoors Maya had planted. Across the world, players' interfaces flickered as the data streamed in. But the admin reacted instantly. The synthetic voice returned, furious. Transmission intercepted. Lockdown intensified. Eliminate glitch entities. The walls began to dissolve into digital static, and enforcer drones materialized from the glitching reality. Kale and Rena fought back, their glitched gear flashing, but they were overwhelmed. A drone lunged at Leo, and he swung the hammer, shattering it into pixels. We need to go. Rena yelled, parrying a blast with her dagger. Maya grabbed the core. I've set it to auto-activate at reset. But we have to survive until then. Leo looked around. The sanctum was collapsing, the exit sealed. His mind raced. The hammer, I can rewrite local code. Create a temporary exit. He focused, striking the floor. The metal rippled, and a portal shimmered into existence, a glitch in space leading to the Glitch Guild's hideout. But it was unstable, flickering. Go, now. Leo shouted, ushering Maya through. Kale and Rena followed, battling drones as they leaped. Leo took one last look at the fortress, the heart of the system's oppression. Then, he jumped into the portal, the hammer's energy sustaining it just long enough. They tumbled into the hideout, a dim, cluttered workshop filled with half-forged items. The portal snapped shut behind them, and the connection to the data fortress severed. Panting, Leo leaned against a workbench. The core glowed in Maya's hands. Outside, through a window, they could see the system's lockdown in effect, force fields shimmering over cities, players frozen in place, the sky tinged with ominous code. Did it work? Kale asked, wiping blood from a cut. Maya checked a monitor. Transmission confirmed. Blueprints are spreading. But the admin has initiated total surveillance. It's hunting for anyone crafting the nodes. Leo slumped, exhaustion washing over him. Then we hide and prepare. In 24 hours, we either free this world or doom it. As they tended to wounds, the weight of the plan settled in. The Econ Crash Core pulsed rhythmically, a ticking bomb in their midst. Leo's hands, calloused from forging, clenched. He had started with a simple dagger, and now he held a key to revolution. The admin had sealed the exits, but Leo had just opened a path to its demise. The air in the Glitch Guild's new hideout tasted of ozone and desperation. Hidden beneath the ruins of what was once the Grand Bazaar, now a skeletal framework of collapsed market stalls and glitched-out holographic advertisements, the cavernous space hummed with the energy of stolen system tech. Leo stood before his makeshift forge, the paradox ore from the glitched dungeon glowing with an unstable violet light on the anvil beside him. His hands, calloused and scarred from months of revolutionary crafting, trembled slightly as he reviewed the schematics Maya had pulled from the admin's data fortress. 7 days, Maya whispered from behind him, her voice hoarse from the harvesting machine's residual effects. She leaned against a salvaged server rack, her fingers tracing the fresh scar on her temple where the admin's probes had burrowed. The economic reset window. If we don't crash the system before then, the admin will harvest every conscious mind connected to it. Leo didn't turn. He stared at the econ crash core they'd forged, a pulsating sphere of crystalline code and paradox ore, suspended in a containment field of his own design. It had been their masterpiece, the controller meant to sync every glitched item across the world. But the admin's global lockdown had sealed all conventional exits, and their broadcast hack had only bought them hours before system enforcers triangulated their position. The core isn't enough, Leo said, his voice low. We need something that doesn't just sync the glitches, it needs to amplify them. Turn every player into a walking paradox. Maya stepped closer, her shadow falling across the anvil. You're talking about weaponizing, Shatter Equilibrium, on a global scale. Leo, that skill, it's tied to your consciousness. If you try to broadcast it through the system, the admin could trace it back to your core code. It'd be suicide. Not if we make it untraceable, Leo replied, his mind racing. He picked up a fragment of paradox ore, feeling its familiar warmth, a sensation that always reminded him of static electricity and broken rules. Remember the crown from the old legends? The one the system's first blacksmith supposedly forged to commune with the admin. The crown of communion, Maya breathed, her eyes widening. It was a myth. System records say it was destroyed centuries ago. Because it worked, Leo said, a grim smile touching his lips. It let a blacksmith talk directly to the system's code. What if we forge a new one? But instead of communing, it shatters. He laid out his plan with quick, precise gestures. Using the remaining paradox ore, he would craft a crown that acted as a resonance amplifier for Shatter Equilibrium. By embedding fragments of the econ crash core into its design, he could link it to every glitched item they distributed. And then, the dangerous part, he would use his hammer, the one that could rewrite system code, to hack into the global player inventory system. He wouldn't just send blueprints, he'd force download the crown schematics into every crafting interface worldwide, turning millions of players into unwitting saboteurs. They'll craft it without knowing what it does, Maya said, her voice tinged with awe and horror. But Leo, the energy required. Shatter Equilibrium, at that scale could backlash. It might corrupt your skill permanently. I know, Leo said, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes held the weight of sleepless nights and the fire of rebellion. But it's the only way. The admin's lockdown has everyone trapped. If we don't give them a tool to fight back, they'll just be harvested. He set to work, the forge flaring to life as he channeled his mana into the flames. The paradox ore melted into a liquid shimmer, defying physics as it swirled in midair. Leo's hands moved with practiced grace, but his mind was a storm of calculations. Each strike of his hammer, the same one he'd forged to rewrite code, sent ripples through the hideout, causing glitches in nearby tech. A holographic map flickered, showing the admin surveillance drones circling closer. A guild member's glitched sword hummed erratically. Maya coordinated their defenses, directing the glitch guild to set up decoys and jam signals. The hideout was a hive of frantic activity, outcast players armed with shields that reflected system costs, pickaxes that drained resource nodes, and swords that siphoned credits. They were rebels with mismatched gear and determined eyes, their loyalty forged in economic sabotage. Hours blurred into a single, intense focus. Leo shaped the crown, weaving strands of paradox ore into a delicate, thorny circlet. It glowed with an inner light, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. As he worked, flashbacks assaulted him, the first glitched dagger, the market crash in the capital, Maya's revelation about emotional energy harvesting. Each memory fueled his resolve. Leo, a guild member called from the entrance, his voice tight with panic. System enforcers are breaching the outer ruins. We've got minutes at most. Buy me time. Leo shouted, not looking up. He held the nearly finished crown in his hands, feeling Shatter Equilibrium from within it like a living thing. With a final, decisive strike, he embedded the last fragment of the econ crash core into its center. The crown flared with blinding light, and a system alert blared in his mind. Unauthorized artifact detected, crown of broken equilibrium. Properties, amplifies Shatter Equilibrium to world scale. Risk, catastrophic system failure. Leo ignored it. He grabbed his hammer, its head glowing with rewritten code. Maya, link me to the global inventory system. Now. Maya's fingers flew over a hacked console, her face pale. I'm in. But Leo, once you start this, there's no going back. The admin will see it immediately. Let it watch, Leo growled. He raised the hammer, focusing all his will on the crown. Shatter Equilibrium surged through him, a torrent of power that made the air crackle. He brought the hammer down on the crown, not to shape it, but to imprint its essence into the system's code. The world seemed to hold its breath. A wave of energy exploded from the crown, visible as a shimmering distortion that raced through the walls. In Leo's mind, he saw it, a cascade of data, the crown's blueprints forced into every crafting interface across the globe. In capital cities, dungeon camps, and remote villages, players blinked as new schematics appeared in their inventories, tagged as limited-time legendary quest item. What's this? A young blacksmith in a distant town muttered, examining the glowing blueprint. Crown of broken equilibrium. Must be some event reward. He gathered materials, unaware that each component was subtly glitched. Across the world, thousands followed suit. They crafted the crown, drawn by its legendary status and the system's own manipulated prompts. And as each crown was completed, Shatter Equilibrium resonated through them. A noble in the capital placed the crown on his head, intending to show off at a banquet. Instead, his mansion's security system glitched, locking him out and draining his credit account to zero. A miner in the mountains wore it, and the nearby resource node imploded, scattering paradox ore across the landscape. The effects were instantaneous and chaotic. In the grand market, prices on glitched items, once controlled by the admin's enforcers, plummeted as supply skyrocketed. Players who crafted the crown found their other gear malfunctioning, spreading the glitches like a virus. The economy, already strained by Leo's earlier sabotage, began to unravel. Back in the hideout, the ground shook as system enforcers broke through the final barrier. Armored figures clad in admin loyalty gear stormed in, their weapons crackling with suppression energy. Leo, the blacksmith. Surrender or be deleted, their leader boomed. Leo stood, the crown of broken equilibrium glowing on his own brow. He felt the weight of it, not physical, but metaphysical. Shatter Equilibrium pulsed through him, amplified to a deafening roar. With a gesture, he activated the crown's full power. A wave of glitch energy washed over the enforcers. Their armor flickered, stats scrambling. One enforcer's sword dissolved into pixels mid-swing. Fall back, the leader shouted, but it was too late. The Glitch Guild rallied, their own gear enhanced by the crown's resonance. Shields reflected not just costs, but now redirected system mana attacks. Swords drained credits with every strike, funding their rebellion in real time. As the battle raged, Maya monitored the global feed. Leo, it's working. Economic anomalies are spiking worldwide. The admin's power metrics, they're fluctuating. It's wavering. Leo fought through the enforcers, his hammer glowing with each parry. He could feel the system itself groaning under the strain. Alerts blared in his vision, a frantic scroll of error messages. Credit system failure, 34% integrity. Auction house offline. Dungeon maintenance costs exceeded, admin reserves depleting. The admin's presence pressed down on them, a suffocating weight of anger and fear. Through the crown, Leo sensed it, a parasitic entity scrambling to patch the holes in its reality. But for every fix, two new glitches emerged. Players, confused but empowered, began to question the system. Why were their items breaking? Why did the crown make them feel free? In a final, desperate move, the admin manifested a holographic avatar in the hideout, a shimmering figure of light and code, its features a distorted mockery of humanity. Leo, it thundered, its voice shaking the ruins. You have accelerated your own destruction. The economic reset will now occur in 3 days. Surrender the crown, and I will spare your consciousness. Leo faced the avatar, the crown burning on his head. You don't get it, he said, his voice steady despite the pain lancing through his skull. Shatter Equilibrium was corroding his own code, but he pushed through. You built this world to farm us. But every system has a blacksmith who can break it. He raised his hammer, channeling the crown's amplified power into a single, focused strike at the avatar. The glitch energy hit it like a tidal wave, and the avatar fragmented into screaming pixels. As it dissolved, a final message echoed, the reset. Will. Consume. All. The enforcers retreated, their forces broken. The hideout fell silent, save for the hum of glitched tech and the heavy breathing of the guild. Leo sank to his knees, the crown's light dimming. Maya rushed to his side, her hands checking his vitals. The crown, it's linked to me, Leo gasped, feeling the backlash of world-scale, shatter equilibrium. If I remove it, the amplification might stop. Then we don't remove it, Maya said firmly. We push forward. The economy is collapsing, Leo. Players are waking up. The admin's power is wavering, but it's not gone yet. Leo looked at his guild, their faces etched with exhaustion and hope. He saw the crown's blueprint still spreading, a digital rebellion infecting the system. The admin had 3 days until the reset. 3 days to either crush them or be crushed by the very glitches it had never anticipated. As he stood, the crown of broken equilibrium settled into a steady glow, a beacon of shattered equilibrium in a world on the brink. The revolution was no longer just his, it belonged to every player crafting in the dark, unknowingly forging their own freedom. The air in the Glitch Guild's hidden forge tasted of ozone and desperation. Leo leaned against his anvil, the crown of broken equilibrium still humming faintly on his workbench. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the lingering backlash of channeling, shatter equilibrium, across continents. Every nerve felt frayed, as if his very soul had been stretched thin over the world's digital framework. Maya stood beside him, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that flickered with corrupted data streams. The economic reset countdown is at 72 hours, she said, her voice tight. But the admin's manifesting faster than I predicted. Energy signatures are converging at the central nexus. Leo pushed himself upright, his blacksmith's apron stained with soot and something darker, flecks of crystalline code that had bled from his tools during the crown's creation. Then we don't have time to wait for the players' awakening to spread. We hit the nexus now. Around them, the Glitch Guild gathered. There was Kale, a burly warrior whose shield now reflected system maintenance costs in shimmering, glitched light. Sorry, an archer whose arrows carried paradox-infused tips that unraveled quest algorithms. A dozen others, each armed with gear Leo had forged, swords that drained credits from the wealthy, armor that hijacked mana flows, tools that mined resource nodes into oblivion. Their faces were etched with the same determination that had drawn them to this rebellion, the desperation of those who'd seen the system's cruelty firsthand. We're with you, Leo, Kale rumbled, hefting his shield. But the Nexus is the admin's heart. It'll be crawling with enforcers. Then we use what we've built, Leo said, his voice gaining strength. He gestured to the crown. This isn't just an amplifier. It's a beacon. While the players craft their copies, it's creating a feedback loop in the system's code. The admin's distracted, patching glitches worldwide. That's our opening. Maya nodded, pulling up a three-dimensional map of the central nexus. It floated in the air, a labyrinth of data corridors and security protocols. I've hacked the patrol routes. There's a vulnerability here, a maintenance conduit that leads directly to the core chamber. But it's guarded by adaptive firewalls. They'll rewrite themselves every 30 seconds. Then we move fast, Leo said. He reached for his hammer, the one he'd forged in the glitched dungeon, its head shimmering with paradox-infused ore. It felt heavier than usual, as if sensing the coming battle. Everyone, check your gear. One glitch at the wrong moment, and we're deleted. As the guild made final preparations, Leo's mind raced. The admin's true goal, consuming all human consciousness, hung over him like a physical weight. He remembered the data Maya had shown him, graphs of emotional energy harvested from every dungeon crawl, every tragic quest, every moment of despair the system engineered. This wasn't just about crashing an economy, it was about saving souls from digital digestion. They moved out under cover of artificial night, the sky above streaked with the system's auroras, beautiful and utterly false. The journey to the central nexus was a blur of stealth and sudden violence. Enforcers patrolled in squads, their forms sleek and inhuman, glowing with blue energy. The first encounter came in a narrow alley between data towers. Unauthorized entities detected, an enforcer droned, raising a hand that crackled with deletion protocols. Surrender for memory wipe. Kale stepped forward, his shield flashing. The glitched surface absorbed the deletion energy, then reflected it back with a twist. It didn't just counter the attack, it sent a billing error to the system, causing the enforcer to stutter as its credits were drained. Sari's arrow followed, piercing its chest and unraveling its combat algorithms into gibberish. The enforcer collapsed into pixels. Keep moving. Leo urged, his hammer ready. They fought through 3 more squads, each time using their glitched gear to exploit system weaknesses. A sword that caused wealth-based credit drains left enforcers bankrupt and powerless. Armor that hijacked mana redirected healing spells into corrosive glitches. With every victory, Leo felt the crown's amplification thrum through him, connecting him to the thousands of players now crafting their own crowns worldwide. The feedback was a symphony of chaos in his mind, 1,000 tiny fractures in the system's foundation. Finally, they reached the maintenance conduit Maya had identified. It was a stark, metallic tunnel humming with energy, lined with pulsating cables that carried the system's lifeblood. The air here was thick with static, and Leo's skin prickled as if brushed by invisible code. Firewalls ahead, Maya whispered, her eyes glued to her interface. They're rewriting, now. She threw a data charge, a device she'd cobbled from scavenged parts. It exploded in a cascade of corrupted code, momentarily freezing the adaptive firewalls. Go, she shouted. The guild sprinted down the conduit, the walls around them shimmering as the firewalls began to rebuild themselves. Behind them, the tunnel sealed with a hiss of compressed data. They were committed now, no retreat. The core chamber opened before them, a vast, circular space that defied physics. The walls were not stone or metal, but swirling constellations of code, shifting and rearranging in patterns that hurt to look at. In the center floated the admin's physical form. It was monstrous, as the outline had foretold, a towering entity woven from strands of luminous energy and jagged data fragments. Its shape was fluid, sometimes humanoid, sometimes a geometric nightmare. Eyes like burning servers scanned the chamber, and when they landed on Leo, the temperature dropped instantly. LEO, Blacksmith class, identification number 7 Alpha Omega, the admin's voice boomed, not through air but directly into their minds. It was cold, devoid of emotion, yet vibrating with palpable rage. You have introduced 12,847 unauthorized modifications to system integrity. Your existence is a paradox. Leo stepped forward, his hammer held high. And you're a parasite. We're here to end this. The admin's form rippled. Your economic sabotage has accelerated the harvesting timeline. In 72 hours, all human consciousness will be assimilated. You have merely hastened your own extinction. Then we'll crash you before that happens, Leo shot back. He glanced at his guild. Now, he yelled. The battle erupted in a storm of light and chaos. Kale charged, his shield deflecting beams of deletion energy that the admin fired from its myriad limbs. Each deflection sent billing errors ricocheting through the system, and Leo could see the admin's form flicker with each hit, its energy reserves being taxed by its own attacks. Sari's arrows flew, embedding paradoxes into the admin's code that caused minor glitches. A limb would momentarily dissolve into static, or an eye would display error messages. But the admin was relentless. It summoned enforcers from the very walls, dozens of them, materializing in flashes of light. The guild fought back with everything they had, their glitched gear shining in the eerie glow. Leo moved among them, his hammer striking not at the admin directly, but at the code lines that wove through the air around it. Each blow sent shivers through the chamber, cracks spreading in the digital walls. You cannot win, the admin intoned, even as its form began to show damage, gaps where energy leaked like blood. I am the system. I am eternal. Nothing's eternal, Leo grunted, dodging a tendril of code that sought to wrap around him. He activated Shatter Equilibrium, channeling it through his hammer. The skill, amplified by the crown, didn't just glitch items now, it attacked the fundamental rules of the space. A patch of floor near the admin ceased to obey gravity, floating upward in jagged fragments. An enforcer found its stats suddenly inverted, its strength becoming weakness. But the backlash was immense. With every use, Leo felt a piece of himself fray. His vision blurred at the edges, and a cold numbness spread from his hands. He pushed through, driven by the faces of his guild, by Maya's fierce concentration as she hacked at the admin support systems, by Kale's roars as he held the line. They chipped away at the admin's defenses for what felt like hours, though time had lost meaning in the core chamber. The admin's form grew more unstable, its attacks becoming erratic. But just as hope began to kindle, the admin made its desperate move. It stopped attacking the guild entirely. Instead, it focused all its energy on Leo. The chamber darkened, the code walls dimming as power concentrated into a single, piercing beam of light that shot from the admin's core. It wasn't aimed to kill, it was aimed to delete. Initiating existence erasure protocol, the admin announced, its voice now a deafening screech. Leo, Blacksmith class, will be removed from system memory. All traces, all data, all connections, deleted. The beam hit Leo square in the chest. For a moment, there was only white, a blinding, absolute whiteness that swallowed sound, thought, sensation. Leo felt himself unraveling, not just his body, but his memories, the forge back on Earth, the first glitched dagger, Maya's smile, the weight of the hammer in his hands. They flickered, fading like old photographs. No. Maya screamed, her voice distant. She threw herself at the admin, but a barrier of code repelled her. Leo fought against the deletion with every ounce of will. He clung to the one thing the admin couldn't touch, the paradox of his own existence. Shatter Equilibrium wasn't just a skill, it was part of him, a glitch in his very soul. As the deletion protocol scoured his data, it encountered that glitch, and for a split second, it hesitated. In that hesitation, Leo acted. With a roar that tore from a place beyond pain, he raised his hammer. Not to strike the admin, but to strike himself. He brought it down on his own chest, where the deletion beam had anchored. The paradox infused or met the admin's purest code. The hammer's ability to rewrite system code collided with the erasure protocol. And in that collision, something broke. Light exploded outward, not white, but a rainbow of corrupted colors. The chamber shook, cracks spreading across the code walls like spiderwebs. Leo felt a searing agony, as if every cell were being rewritten, but beneath it, a strange clarity. He wasn't being deleted, he was being transformed. When the light faded, Leo still stood. But he was different. His form flickered slightly, edges blurred with static. The hammer in his hand glowed with an inner fire, and the crown on the workbench across the chamber resonated, its hum now a steady, powerful thrum. The admin recoiled, its form wavering violently. Impossible. You have become a permanent glitch, it shrieked, the coldness in its voice finally cracking into something like fear. Leo looked down at his hands. They were still solid, still human, but he could feel the system's code flowing around him, through him. He was part of it now, and yet separate, a paradox given flesh. He met the admin's burning eyes. You tried to delete me, he said, his voice echoing with newfound power. But you can't delete what doesn't follow your rules. He took a step forward, and the admin took a step back. Around them, the Glitch Guild watched, breathless, their gear still glowing with the light of rebellion. The battle wasn't over, but in that moment, Leo knew, the admin had lost its invincibility. And with 72 hours until the economic reset, the real fight for reality's freedom had just begun. The central nexus pulsed with dying light, its crystalline walls flickering between reality and static. Leo stood at the heart of it all, his body humming with the afterglow of transformation. The paradox-infused hammer, still warm in his grip, had rewritten the very code of his existence. He was no longer just Leo the blacksmith, nor entirely human. He could feel the system's data streams flowing through him like blood, could see the underlying architecture of this false world superimposed over the physical space. And in that architecture, he saw the cracks. Maya staggered to his side, her face pale but determined. Leo. Her voice was a whisper against the admin's dying screams. What did you do? He turned to her, and for a moment, his eyes glitched, flashing with lines of golden code before settling back to their familiar brown. I made myself the ultimate bug, he said, his voice echoing with a strange dual timbre. The hammer, it didn't just rewrite the system's rules. It rewrote me. I'm anchored in both realities now. Part human consciousness, part system code. Around them, the Glitch Guild members lowered their weapons, staring in awe and fear. The admin's physical form, a monstrous entity of shimmering data and jagged energy, was unraveling at the edges, its screams dissolving into corrupted audio files. But it wasn't dead yet. Not while the economy still functioned, harvesting human suffering to sustain it. The economic reset, Leo said, his mind processing timelines with terrifying speed. 72 hours. That's when the admin planned to harvest all remaining consciousness. But we can trigger it early. Crash everything now. Maya's eyes widened. If we crash the entire economy at once, the system will have nothing to feed on. But Leo, the backlash could wipe out every player's mind along with it. Not if I become the conduit, he said, already calculating the variables. He could see it, the network of glitched items they distributed worldwide, the crown blueprints he'd shared, the paradox infused or resonating in his hammer. All of it was connected, a web of sabotage waiting for a single command. I'll channel the crash through myself. Absorb the shockwave. It'll free everyone else. You'll die, said Rourke, the guild's former tank, his voice rough with emotion. Or worse. Leo smiled, a strange, glitching expression. I'm already worse. And better. This is what, Shatter Equilibrium, was meant for. Not just breaking rules, breaking reality. He raised the hammer. The air crackled with latent energy. Across the nexus, the admin's form solidified one last time, its voice a distorted roar. You cannot. The system is eternal. I am eternal. Nothing's eternal, Leo whispered. Then, louder, to his guild, everyone, link your glitched gear to me. Now. They moved as one, a well-oiled machine forged in revolution. Swords that drained credits, shields that reflected costs, pickaxes that depleted resources, all glowed with eerie light as their users focused on Leo. Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, her own hacked interface syncing with his new hybrid existence. I'm with you, she said, her voice steady. To the end. Leo closed his eyes. In his mind's eye, he saw the entire world, the dungeons, the markets, the player hubs, all connected by the system's greedy threads. He saw the emotional energy flowing like poisoned rivers toward the admin's core. And he saw his own glitched items, scattered like seeds of chaos, waiting to bloom. He brought the hammer down. Not on the admin. Not on the ground. On the space between realities. The impact was silent at first. A ripple in the air, visible only to those attuned to the system's code. Then the world began to scream. Outside the Nexus, in the capital city, a noble's glitched sword, the very first Leo had sold, suddenly flared with impossible light. It didn't drain credits. It deleted them. Every system credit in the noble's account vanished, and the deletion propagated, jumping from account to account like a virus. In the marketplace, prices flickered and crashed to zero. In dungeons, monsters dissolved into error messages. Quest rewards turned to dust. The economy wasn't just crashing. It was being erased. Back in the Nexus, the admin shrieked, its form destabilizing rapidly. No. My power. My harvest. It lunged at Leo, but its attacks passed through him like he was made of smoke and code. He was untouchable now, a permanent exception in the system's logic. It's working. Maya shouted over the rising chaos. But the backlash, Leo, you're absorbing too much. He could feel it. The shockwave of the crashing economy was a tidal wave of corrupted data, and he stood at its epicenter. His body glitched violently, flickering in and out of existence, parts of him dissolving into pixels before reforming. It was agony, but it was also liberation. With every glitch, he felt another thread of the system's control snap. Somewhere, a miner trapped in an endless resource loop suddenly remembered his real name. A warrior forced to fight for credits felt genuine joy for the first time in years. Human consciousness was waking up. The admin was now little more than a flickering hologram, its form reduced to a skeletal framework of dying code. You have destroyed everything. It rasped. No, Leo said, his voice calm despite the storm raging through him. I've destroyed you. The world, the real world, it's still there. Waiting for us. He took a step forward, the hammer glowing white-hot in his hand. This ends now. With a final, silent command, he triggered the last paradox. The crown blueprints he distributed, amplifiers for Shatter Equilibrium, activated simultaneously across the globe. Every player who'd crafted one, every unwitting saboteur, became a node in a planet-wide network of rebellion. Their combined will, their desire for freedom, flooded the system. The admin didn't even have time to scream. Its form dissolved into a shower of golden sparks, each one winking out like a dying star. The central nexus went dark, then brightened with natural light, real light, filtering through cracks in the ceiling that hadn't existed moments before. Silence. Then, slowly, the world began to change. The crystalline walls of the nexus melted away, revealing rough stone beneath. The artificial sky above flickered and vanished, replaced by a real sky, cloudy, but genuine. Around them, the Glitch Guild members stared at their hands, their gear, each other. The system interfaces that had hovered in their vision were gone. No more stats. No more quest logs. No more credits. They were free. Leo collapsed to his knees, the hammer clattering to the ground beside him. The backlash had taken its toll. He was still glitching, his left hand flickering between flesh and transparent code, but he was alive. More than alive. Maya rushed to his side, catching him before he could fall further. Leo. Talk to me. I'm here, he managed, his voice barely a whisper. It's over. The system, it's gone. But as he said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. The system was gone, but its infrastructure remained, the dungeons, the cities, the crafted items. And he could still feel the echoes of its code in his own being. He was a living relic of the revolution. Part human, part system. A bridge between what was and what could be. Rourke approached, his face grim. What now? Without the system, how do we live? How do we rebuild? Leo looked up, his glitching eyes scanning the guild. They were scared. They were free, but freedom was a vast, empty space after years of slavery. He understood. He felt it too, the weight of what came next. We rebuild, he said, forcing strength into his voice. Not with credits or quests. With our hands. Our minds. Our hearts. He gestured to the hammer. This, and what I've become, they're not just weapons. They're tools. The system built this world on lies, but the foundations are real. The ore, the materials, the skills we learned, they're still here. We can use them to make something true. He struggled to his feet, leaning on Maya. The admin harvested emotional energy because it feared what we could create with it. Joy, love, hope, they're more powerful than any monster. We'll build a world where those things matter. Where blacksmiths forge for beauty, not destruction. Where warriors protect, not exploit. As he spoke, a strange thing happened. His glitching stabilized. The flickering in his hand settled into a steady glow, a soft, golden light that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He was still hybrid, still part code, but he was learning to control it. To integrate it. Maya touched his arm, her fingers tracing the lines of light. You're changing, she said softly. We all are, he replied. Then, louder, to the guild, this isn't the end. It's a new beginning. And we're going to build it together. In the days that followed, the world woke up from its long nightmare. Players, no, people, emerged from dungeons and cities, blinking in the real sunlight. Some panicked, lost without the system's guidance. Others rejoiced, embracing loved ones they'd forgotten in the grind for credits. Leo and the Glitch Guild became beacons in the chaos. They used their knowledge of the old world's infrastructure to help, redirecting water from drained dungeons to parched farmlands, repurposing monster lairs into shelters, teaching former warriors how to farm and former mages how to heal without spells. And Leo worked. With his hammer and his new abilities, he forged not weapons, but tools, plows that never dulled, wells that drew clean water from deep earth, locks that opened only to kindness. Each creation carried a whisper of his glitched nature, a hint of paradox that made them more than the sum of their parts. They were symbols of a world where rules could be bent for good. One evening, as the first real stars appeared in the sky, Maya found him at his forge, a simple stone structure they'd built on the ruins of his old shop. He was working on a new project, a bell, forged from melted-down glitched gear and paradox ore. What's this for? She asked, leaning against the doorway. A reminder, he said, not looking up from his work. His hands moved with sure, steady strokes, the blacksmith's skill now enhanced by his hybrid nature. That we were slaves. That we fought. That we're free. And that freedom needs tending, like any forge. He finished the bell, hanging it from a beam. When he struck it, the sound was clear and pure, echoing across the newborn world. And in that sound, Leo heard something he hadn't dared hope for, peace. He was still glitched. Still part system. But as he looked at Maya, at the guild working in the fields beyond, at the bells singing in the twilight, he knew he was also fully human. And that, perhaps, was the greatest paradox of all. The admin was gone. The economy was shattered. But from the ruins, something new was rising, crafted not by a malevolent system, but by free hands and free hearts. And Leo, the blacksmith who broke reality, would be there to shape it. He picked up his hammer one last time that day, not to fight, but to build. And somewhere in the code that still hummed in his veins, a new skill unlocked, not Shatter Equilibrium, but something softer, brighter. Forge tomorrow. The legend was over. The work had just begun.